Chapter 2543. Secrets of the Boundless Taishu. When Qi recognized Zhuo Wen, his heart was like a stormy sea. When Zhuo Wen left the Tian domain of Huaxia, he had left behind a great reputation. Even now, when Zhuo Wen's name was mentioned in the Tian domain of Huaxia, almost no one didn't know him. There was no other reason. It was mainly because of what Zhuo Wen had done in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. As a mere heaven god, he had single-handedly defeated the Blood God Hall and killed 9 of the 10 protectors of the Blood God Hall. He had almost killed the first protector, Shui Jian, and injured the master of the Blood God Hall. The creatures of the Huaxia Heaven Domain were all familiar with the Blood Shrine, and their expressions all changed when they heard about it. Although the Blood Divine Hall was not the strongest hall in the Taiqing Immortal Realm, it was the most difficult and terrifying hall to deal with. As long as one was targeted by the assassins of the Blood Divine Hall, one would basically die. However, Zhuo Wen had destroyed the Blood God Temple in one fell swoop when he was only a heavenly god. He had killed almost all of the assassins in the Blood God Temple and even injured the Blood God. This had shaken the entire Huaxia Heaven region. The reason why Zhuo Wen was so famous was mainly because Zhuo Wen's cultivation was too low back then. However, he was able to accomplish such an incredible feat. It was not difficult to understand why he was praised by everyone. At this moment, the white-robed young man in front of him had no aura at all. He looked ordinary, but Qi did not dare to underestimate him. Back then, Zhuo Wen had caused such a huge commotion and suddenly disappeared for hundreds of years, but Qi knew how terrifying this young man was. With Zhuo Wen's talent and strength, Qi knew that he was definitely a Void Sky Realm expert. According to his estimation, Zhuo Wen's cultivation should be around 2nd Ascension Void Sky. Of course, this was only Qi's guess. At the same time, he also thought of the Void Sky powerhouse who had forced the Long River Galaxy. He looked at the white-robed young man in front of him with a hint of hope in his eyes. Although Qi was unable to discern the young man's exact cultivation, he could sense that the young man was even more unfathomable than before. If he could get Zhuo Wen's support, Qi knew that the Void Sky powerhouse who was forcing the Long River Galaxy would hesitate to take action. He might even give up on the Long River Galaxy. Zhuo Wen looked at Qi indifferently. Qi's cultivation level had improved a few hundred years ago. He was already a 2-calamity true god. However, this bit of cultivation was no different from an ant in his eyes. The reason he had come to the Long River Galaxy was naturally to ask Qi about the route to the Boundless Taishu. Zhuo Wen hadn't stayed in the Huaxia Heaven Domain for long. He had only stayed in the Long River Galaxy and the Taiqing Immortal Realm. As for the Wuji Taishu, although it was famous in the Huaxia Heaven Domain, Zhuo Wen didn't know anything about it. Although the Long River Galaxy was a galaxy at the edge of the Huaxia Heaven territory and was relatively remote, Qi was still a member of the Huaxia Heaven territory and had stayed in this galaxy for countless years. Zhuo Wen knew that Qi should know the route to the Boundless Taishu. Qi quickly broke the silence and came up to greet him warmly. His eyes were fervent as he said, "Lord Zhuo, your presence brings light to this humble Qi's humble dwelling." Qi hurriedly invited Zhuo Wen to the head of the 2 rows of seats in the hall. His face was as bright as a blooming chrysanthemum. Zhuo Wen just nodded and sat down leisurely. He silently looked at the enthusiastic Qi. He could tell from Qi's attitude and expression that the latter had something to ask of him. "Brother Qi, you can just call me Brother Zhuo," Zhuo Wen said indifferently. Qi looked a little embarrassed. Zhuo Wen's actions back then were too earth-shattering. After Qi recognized Zhuo Wen, he naturally changed the way he addressed him. However, the embarrassment on Qi's face quickly disappeared and he said with a smile, "Then I'll have to offend you." Zhuo Wen nodded and said indifferently, "I'm revisiting an old place. I have something to ask of Brother Qi." Qi was delighted when he heard this. He had something to ask of Zhuo Wen in the first place. Now that he hadn't mentioned it yet, Zhuo Wen had taken the initiative to mention it. He was naturally overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Brother Zhuo, feel free to mention it. As long as I, Qi, am able to do it, I will definitely not refuse." Qi originally had something to ask of him. Now that Zhuo Wen had brought it up first, he knew that if he asked Zhuo Wen to help him later, The latter would probably agree to his request on account of their friendship. I need the route to the boundless Taishu. Do you have it? Zhuowen asked. Chi-Chi's face stiffened and he immediately looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. Brother Zhuo, you want to go to the boundless Taishu? Why? Is there a problem with me going to the boundless Taishu? Zhuowen asked with a frown when he saw Chi-Chi's strange expression. Chi-Chi sighed. Brother Zhuo, perhaps you still don't know the situation in the boundless Taishu? The boundless Taishu is a great treasure land in the Huaxia heavenly domain. At the same time, it's also very dangerous. I heard that even Void Sky 9 Steps experts are in danger of dying if they enter. Brother Zhuo, you're probably planning to enter the boundless Taishu to search for treasures, right? However, I advise you to give up on that idea because the boundless Taishu is now more dangerous than before. I heard that the Hall Master of the North Dock Hall, Perfected North Dock, who is ranked third in the 100 halls of the Taiching Immortal Realm, entered the boundless Taishu a few months ago and completely died there. Perfected North Dock was a life enlightenment realm expert. If even such an expert died, as he spoke, Chi-Chi glanced at Zhuowen and shook his head without saying anything. Although he knew that Zhuowen was not simple, he also knew that the strength of the white-clothed youth in front of him naturally could not be compared to Perfected North Dock. He was simply courting death. Oh! Even a life enlightenment realm expert died there? Zhuowen muttered to himself with a strange look in his eyes. Zhuowen had entered many dangerous places. Whether it was the waning waxing moons, the skeleton world, or the river of spacetime quicksand, they were all extremely dangerous places. However, whether it was the waning waxing moons, the skeleton world, or the river of spacetime quicksand, Zhuowen knew that it was impossible for a life enlightenment realm expert to die there. At most, it would injure him. After all, Zhuowen had just advanced to the life enlightenment realm and was very familiar with it. It should be known that when one's realm reached the life enlightenment realm, their body would produce mysterious life divine power endlessly. As long as their divine soul was not completely destroyed and the illusory sky bridge was not completely annihilated, it was basically very difficult to kill them. Back then, he had killed the Fragrant Desire Palace Master of the Six Desires Palace because Zhuowen was too abnormal. Whether it was the Death Chi or the waning sun above the sea, they were extremely restrained by the mysterious life divine power. In addition, the Fragrant Desire Palace Master had underestimated his opponent. That was why Zhuowen had been able to kill her so easily. Of course, with Zhuowen's current strength, he could even kill an existence like Palace Master Wu Ju and was close to the level of the NTI Shiva. Although Wuji Taishu was terrifying, Zhuowen did not plan to retreat. However, from what Chi-Chi had said, it seemed that Wuji Taishu was not that terrifying in the past. Brother Chi, is there any other reason why Wuji Taishu has become so dangerous? Zhuowen asked. Chapter 2544. The blue-haired Manjuan nodded and said indifferently, Brother Chi, please give me the route to boundless Taishu. Brother Zhuowen, even a life enlightenment realm expert has fallen. Do you still intend to go? Chi-Chi looked at Zhuowen in surprise. Is a life enlightenment realm expert that powerful? Just because a life enlightenment realm expert has fallen in boundless Taishu doesn't mean that I, Zhuowen, will also fall in boundless Taishu. Although Zhuowen's tone was indifferent, his eyes were full of confidence. Zhuowen was no longer the little sky god who had just left Heavenly Armor Planet. He was now the ruler of Great Brahma and had killed several life enlightenment realm experts. There were very few in the 8 heavens that could threaten him. What did Zhuowen have to fear? Chi-Chi shook his head inwardly, thinking that Zhuowen was a little arrogant. Although what Zhuowen had done back then was extremely sensational, he knew that Zhuowen had relied on the power of Great Pure One's Tao intent and had only injured the Blood God at that time. The Blood God was the Hall Master of the Blood Divine Hall. There was still a gap between him and the Hall Master of the North Dock Hall, Perfected North Dock. Zhuowen could not even kill the Blood God back then, so he was naturally far inferior to Perfected North Dock. Although it had been a few hundred years, Chi-Chi knew that Zhuowen should have improved, but no matter how much he improved, he would at most advance to the Void Sky realm. As for the Life Enlightenment realm, how could such an extraordinary realm be achieved in a few hundred years? Seeing Chi-Chi's expression, Zhuowen knew that the latter did not believe him at all. However, he did not care and said indifferently, "Brother Qi, I only want the route to boundless Taishu." Seeing that Zhuowen didn't listen to his advice, Qi simply stopped talking. He immediately took out a jade slip from his spirit ring and handed it to Zhuowen. "Brother Zhuo, this jade slip records the approximate route to boundless Taishu. Also, I remember that boundless Taishu has been sealed off by many forces of the heaven domain. Something big might have happened inside, so be careful." Zhuowen frowned slightly as he took the jade slip. He checked it and found that the route in the jade slip was too rough. If he followed the rough route in the jade slip, he might not be able to reach Wuji Taishu. There should be some deviation. What Zhuowen needed was a specific route, not a rough map like this. Fortunately, the approximate route was recorded on the map. Zhuowen only needed to roughly deduce the route and he should be able to reach boundless Taishu easily. "Thank you, Brother Qi." Zhuowen cupped his fists and looked at Qi silently. He knew that Qi probably had something to ask of him. Now that he had asked for the route, he naturally wouldn't leave after taking it. He wasn't that kind of person. Sure enough, Qi told him about his current predicament. It was about that void sky expert telling them to scram from the Long River Galaxy and wanting to occupy it. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a strange expression. The Long River Galaxy could be said to be the outermost region of the Hua Xia heaven domain. It could be considered the weakest galaxy in the entire heaven domain. Not to mention void sky experts, even true gods were pitifully rare. Yet, someone had set his eyes on the Long River Galaxy. Moreover, the person who had set his eyes on the Long River Galaxy was a void sky expert. Could it be that there was some secret in the Long River Galaxy? Thinking of this, Zhuowen's powerful consciousness radiated outwards and immediately encompassed the entire Long River Galaxy. When Qi felt Zhuowen's powerful consciousness, his legs trembled and he almost fell to the ground. He looked at Zhuowen in horror and his heart was in turmoil. What a powerful divine sense! How can Zhuowen have such a powerful divine sense? Under this consciousness, Qi felt as if he had been stripped naked. There were no secrets on his body to speak of. After about a quarter of an hour, Zhuowen withdrew his consciousness and furrowed his brows. Just now, he had used his divine sense to check the Long River Galaxy inside and out, but he didn't find anything strange about it. "Do you want me to help you drive away that void sky expert?" Zhuowen came back to his senses and looked at Qi. Qi's face became even more respectful and he hurriedly said, "Yes, I hope that Brother Zhuo can help me since you lived in the Long River Galaxy for a period of time. Do you know the specific strength of that void sky expert?" Zhuowen asked indifferently. Qi looked embarrassed and said, "This Qi strength is low," so Zhuowen nodded and said, "Okay, I'll help you." "Where is that expert?" Qi said even more awkwardly, "I don't know where that expert is. I only know that in 10 days, that expert will come to the Long River Galaxy again. At that time, I'm afraid." Zhuowen said indifferently, "Then I'll wait here for 10 days. Qi was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed. During these 10 days, Zhuowen basically lived in the most luxurious mansion arranged by Qi. Many cultivators in the Long River Galaxy's main city knew that Qi had invited a void sky expert to oversee the situation. The fear of the void sky expert wanting them to move away had subsided a lot. After all, their Long River Galaxy also had a void sky expert overseeing it. Naturally, they didn't fear the void sky expert who had threatened their galaxy. During these 10 days, Qi cleverly didn't disturb Zhuowen. On the 10th day, Qi arrived outside Zhuowen's mansion and bowed respectfully. Brother Zhuo, it's been 10 days." After Qi finished speaking, the mansion's door opened by itself. A white-clothed youth slowly walked out. However, the white-clothed youth didn't look at Qi. Instead, he looked at the starry sky outside the main city and said with a slight smile, "The void sky expert you mentioned is already here. Moreover, he's an expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage." "What? An expert at the peak of the 8th step void sky stage? How is that possible?" Qi's body trembled as he shouted in disbelief. The Long River Galaxy didn't even have a void sky expert, and an expert at the peak of the 8th-step void sky stage was already a peak expert in the heaven domain. Chi-Chi didn't even have the qualifications to meet such an expert. After all, Chi-Chi was simply an ant in front of such an expert. Zhuowen didn't answer Chi-Chi. Instead, he stepped into the void and quietly floated above the Long River Galaxy, bearing the gaze of countless cultivators in the galaxy. This caused a lot of uproar. All the cultivators in the galaxy knew that the white-clothed youth floating alone above the galaxy should be the void sky expert that Chi-Chi had invited. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze was calm, but his heart wasn't as calm. He naturally didn't care about an expert at the peak of the 8th-step void sky stage. What he found strange was that an expert at the peak of the 8th-step void sky stage actually wanted to snatch an extremely remote galaxy like the Long River Galaxy. It was really too strange. Thinking of this, Zhuowen increasingly felt that there was something hidden in the Long River Galaxy. However, he couldn't detect it with his divine sense. Whoosh! Soon, a violent sound of something breaking through the void came from the depths of the starry sky like a meteor streaking across the starry sky. Soon, this stream of light stopped not far from the Long River Galaxy. Chi-Chi, this old man gave you and the Long River Galaxy a chance to survive, but you didn't grasp it well. Don't blame me for being impolite. The stream of light gradually converged, revealing the figure inside. This was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He had blue hair, azure eyes, and even the clothes he was wearing were blue. Chapter 2545. Void Sky Collision. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man released an extremely terrifying killing intent. This killing intent was like a cloud that enveloped the entire Long River Galaxy. Countless cultivators in the Long River Galaxy felt this killing intent and their hearts trembled. They all knelt on the ground. Some of the weaker cultivators even spat out mouthfuls of blood. Their faces turned pale and their bodies twitched. What a terrifying killing intent. What kind of expert is he? It's over. Our Long River Galaxy actually provoked such a terrifying void sky expert. He's at the peak of the void sky 8th step. In the Huaxia heavenly region, he's already a supreme expert. What should we do? This kind of expert can destroy our Long River Galaxy with a wave of his hand. Didn't our Long River Galaxy's Chi-Chi invite a void sky expert? Perhaps he can stop him. You're thinking too much. This young man's aura isn't obvious. Perhaps he really is a void sky expert, but I'm afraid he won't be able to stop a peak void sky expert. Countless cultivators in the Long River Galaxy were in an uproar. They discussed spiritedly, but their eyes were filled with despair and fear. Chi-Chi's body trembled and a wave of regret rose in his heart. He knew he shouldn't have placed all his hopes on Zhuowen. He knew that Zhuowen was definitely a void sky expert, but it was impossible for him to reach the peak of the void sky 8th step in such a short time. Facing this blue-haired, blue-eyed peak void sky expert, Chi-Chi knew that Zhuowen would lose without a doubt. Moreover, he would lose his life. You want to destroy the Long River Galaxy? Have you asked me? Zhuowen stood with his hands behind his back and looked calmly at the blue-haired, blue-eyed middle-aged man in front of him. Zhuowen felt that this blue-haired, blue-eyed man wasn't an ordinary cultivator. Although his cultivation seemed to be at the peak of the void sky 8th step, Zhuowen could feel that there was an even more profound and mysterious power within this man's body. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man slowly turned his head and stared at Zhuowen with his blue eyes. He sneered and said, "You think you're qualified?" Many of the cultivators in the Long River system shook their heads inwardly, thinking that Zhuowen was overestimating himself. After all, the aura of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man was simply too vast. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Just by sensing it, many cultivators felt their hearts tremble. On the other hand, the aura of the white-robed young man was much inferior. It was even somewhat ordinary. All the cultivators in the Long River Galaxy shook their heads and sighed. They knew that the void sky expert invited by Chi-Chi was doomed. They knew that even though the white-haired youth was also a void sky expert, in their opinion, he was at most a void sky expert at the first or second step. There was a huge gap between him and a peak void sky expert at the 8th step. All the cultivators in Long River system wanted to retreat. They wanted to take out their flying divine artifacts and leave Long River System as far away as possible. However, these cultivators quickly discovered that their actions were completely futile. This was because the terrifying killing intent radiating from the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had firmly locked onto them, making it difficult for them to circulate their divine power, let alone use their flying artifacts to leave this place. Sigh. We're done for. Chi-Chi's heart sank, especially when he felt the terrifying killing intent. The only hope in his heart had completely dissipated. He knew that the entire Long River System would not be able to escape this calamity. As for Zhuowen, he was afraid that he would also die here. Zhuowen looked indifferently at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man with a contemplative expression. He didn't care about the cultivation of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. However, there was an obscure aura on the blue-haired, blue-eyed man that Zhuowen was somewhat familiar with. As for what it was, Zhuowen couldn't remember. What? Are you afraid? If you're afraid, then immediately kneel in front of me and kowtow 100 times to apologize. Then, scram as far away as you can. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuowen arrogantly. However, Zhuowen shook his head and said, if you apologize now, I'll spare your life. Otherwise, you won't have any chance at all. As soon as Zhuowen said this, all the cultivators in Long River System revealed bitter smiles. Chi-Chi shook his head and sighed. This Zhuowen is still too young. He's still so arrogant in the face of such an expert. Could it be that he thinks the Grand Pure One is his backing? Chi-Chi knew that Zhuowen was the Grand Pure One's disciple. However, after Chi-Chi found out that Zhuowen had left the Huaxia Heaven Realm, he no longer had anything to do with the Grand Pure One. He knew that the Grand Pure One wouldn't stand up for Zhuowen, so he was quite puzzled that Zhuowen was still so arrogant. Could it be that this Zhuowen had some backing? However, Chi-Chi soon smiled bitterly. He knew that he was overthinking. No matter how strong this Zhuowen was, it was impossible for him to reach the peak of the 8th step Void Heaven Realm in such a short time. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was stunned at first. Then, he looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "You want me to apologize? Do you know who you're talking to? Who do you think you are? You don't have the right to let me know who you are." Zhuowen said indifferently, but this caused another uproar. Many cultivators in Long River System felt that Zhuowen was too arrogant. Good. You're really arrogant and conceited enough. Watch how I teach you a lesson today. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was so angry that he laughed. He quickly formed a seal with his hands. Immediately, waves of blue energy rushed out and formed a blue mist. The blue mist kept rolling and then turned into an angry dragon. It suddenly rushed out and rushed towards Zhuowen. When Zhuowen's divine sense fell on the blue mist, his eyes narrowed slightly. This blue mist was not real mist. It was actually made up of countless small blue insects. Because these small insects were very small, it was difficult to see them clearly with the naked eye. If these small insects gathered together in groups, it was really easy to see the blue mist from a distance. GU insects. The moment Zhuowen saw the little bug that formed the blue mist, he thought of the blood parasite chain he had seen in the true dragon blood pool. The GU insects in the blue mist had the same attack method as the blood GU. However, the power of the small blue insects was far inferior to the blood GU he saw in the past. In just an instant, Zhuowen's figure was completely wrapped in the blue mist. It was difficult to see him. A long sigh came from the Long River System. Many cultivators knew that the Void Sky powerhouse invited by Chi-Chi had been killed in one move. Chi-Chi smiled bitterly. His heart was full of regret. Why did he ask Zhuowen to block this terrifying powerhouse? In the end, everyone in the Long River System was going to die. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sneered and said disdainfully, "Overconfident ant. I thought you were very powerful. You can't even take the most ordinary attack." Boom. Before the blue-haired, blue-eyed man finished speaking, the blue mist in front of him exploded. Immediately, a white-clothed young man slowly stepped out with a grey divine sword in his hand. Chapter 2546. Complete suppression. Is that all you've got? Zhuowen held the king's sword and looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man indifferently. His eyes finally showed a trace of interest. He finally knew why the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had a familiar aura. It turned out to be the power of a venomous insect. Originally, Zhuowen knew nothing about venomous insects, but he inherited the memories of Miao Bang. Miao Bang was an expert of the sorcerer tribe, and his blood-venomous insect divine ability was famous in the sorcerer tribe. His knowledge and use of venomous insects far surpassed ordinary sorcerer tribe members. Therefore, the moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man attacked, Zhuowen had already guessed that he was using the power of a venomous insect. However, what Zhuowen didn't understand was why, other than the Miao Bang, there were other people in the 8 heavens who could use the mysterious power of venomous insects. One had to know that only the sorcerer tribe knew and used the secret of venomous insects. It was very difficult for a human to use the sorcerer tribe's cultivation method. After all, the human race and the sorcerer tribe were 2 different races with different internal structures. Naturally, their cultivation methods were also very different. However, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man in front of him was clearly a human, but he actually used the power of a venomous insect. This made Zhuowen very puzzled. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's gaze finally became serious. He suppressed the shock in his eyes and looked at Zhuowen with fear. "Not bad, you actually blocked my attack." Many cultivators in the Long River Galaxy also looked surprised, but their surprise soon turned into ecstasy. No one expected that the white-clothed young man, who they didn't think very highly of, could easily block the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's attack. Didn't that mean that the white-clothed young man was also an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step? It seems that I was wrong. Brother Zhuo is also an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step. But how is this possible? When he left China, he was only a heavenly god. In just a few hundred years, after returning to China, his cultivation has already reached the peak of the Void Sky 8th step. How did he cultivate so quickly? Chi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Soon after, intense shock filled his face. He knew a little about Zhuowen. Therefore, he found it even more unbelievable than others. After all, a few hundred years ago, Zhuowen was only at the heavenly god realm when he was brought to their Long River Galaxy by the Pure Sky sect. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred years had passed, yet this kid was already able to resist an expert at the peak of the 8th Ascension Void stage like the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. Wasn't this abnormal? Brother Zhuo is truly a dragon amongst men. I'm afraid that only Lian Meng of the Huaxia Sky region, who possesses the innate immortal body, can match up to his cultivation speed. The disciples of the Domain Lord of Taiching are truly abnormal. Chi took a deep breath and looked at the young man in white with a complicated expression as he sighed with emotion. "Why don't you use your strongest move? Otherwise, you won't have a chance." Zhuowen hovered in the air and looked at Chi indifferently. A trace of anger appeared in the blue-haired man's eyes when he saw Zhuowen's arrogance. He said, "You think too highly of yourself. Do you think you're invincible just because you've received a single attack from me?" Zhuowen looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man silently and did not reply. With his strength, it would be easy for him to kill the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. However, when he saw the blue-haired, blue-eyed man use the power of GU worms, Zhuowen did not plan to be in a hurry to attack. Instead, he wanted to see what other attacks the blue-haired, blue-eyed man had. After all, this was the first time in the 8 heavens that he had seen a human using the power of GU worms of the Shaman clan. He naturally wanted to see it for himself. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's eyes burned with anger when he saw Zhuowen's calm appearance. He roared angrily, and the sound of bones breaking rang out from his body. Then, the sound of bones breaking rang out continuously. Blue mist burst out from the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's body, and the blue-haired, blue-eyed man involuntarily let out a low scream. The enormous blue fog began to adhere to the surface of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's body. Subsequently, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's clothes began to tear apart inch by inch. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man continued to grow taller within the blue fog. In just an instant, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man turned into a 10,000-foot tall giant. However, the skin of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man was dark blue, and his upper body was naked. If one looked carefully, they would see that the skin of the giant was densely packed with small blue insects. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's aura increased by 1,000 times. He had already broken through the peak of the 8 steps void sky realm and entered the half-step 9 steps void sky realm. When this aura burst out, countless cultivators in the Long River system turned pale. Even Chi-Chi was no exception. They all looked at Zhuowen with unconcealable worry in their eyes. Die. After the blue-haired, blue-eyed man used the power of the GU insects to transform into a 10,000-foot-tall giant, he roared angrily. The sound waves spread out in all directions. Then, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took a step forward. Rumble. With just one step, an ear-piercing explosion rang out in the starry sky. It was as if countless lightning bolts were wreaking havoc in the starry sky. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man appeared in front of Zhuowen like a blue phantom. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked down at Zhuowen, who was as small as an ant in front of him. His eyes were filled with indifference. Then, he stretched out his right hand, clenched it into a fist, and slammed it down at Zhuowen. How terrifying. This attack should be enough to wipe out the entire Long River galaxy. This is the power of a half-step 9 steps void sky realm expert. Chi-Chi's body trembled. His face was pale, and his voice was trembling. How can a candle light compete with the sun and moon? The blue-haired, blue-eyed man laughed heartily. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at a dead man. Zhuowen hovered in the starry sky, quietly looking at the huge blue arm that was getting closer and closer. The corners of his mouth revealed a trace of mockery. Zhuowen slowly raised the king's sword and gently slashed out. It was like an old man dancing by a lake. However, the moment the king's sword touched the huge arm, endless astral winds erupted. Then, the entire starry sky erupted with terrifying space-time distortions. Then, the huge arm of the blue-haired, blue-eyed man shattered into pieces. Ah! The blue-haired, blue-eyed man screamed and quickly retreated. He looked ahead in horror, but he didn't see any trace of Zhuowen. Are you looking for me? An indifferent voice sounded behind the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. Before the blue-haired, blue-eyed man could turn around, he felt a pain in his waist. Then, he felt his flesh and blood being crushed and annihilated by a terrifying energy. Ah! No, what is this power? Chapter 2547. Servant Poochie. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at the white-robed youth with disbelief. He had used his final trump card. His strength was comparable to a half-step void sky 9th step expert, but it was defeated by the youth in front of him in just a few moves. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man faintly felt that if the white-robed youth wanted to kill him, that sword strike just now would have been enough to kill him. However, the white-robed youth did not do so. The Long River galaxy, on the other hand, fell into a long period of silence. But soon, an uproar broke out. All the cultivators looked at the white-robed youth hovering above the galaxy, their eyes filled with passion. A shocking talent. He must have already reached the void sky 9th step. In the entire Long River galaxy, the person with the most complicated feelings was Chi-Chi. He knew Zhuowen very well. The weak heavenly deity in the past had already become a peak expert in the heaven domain. If someone said this in front of him in the past, he would definitely slap them and scold them for talking nonsense. But now, this kind of thing happened in front of his eyes. He knew that this was all real, so he couldn't help but sigh. This Zhuowen was a world-shocking genius. He was even more heaven-defying than Lian Meng, who had an innate immortal body in the Grand Clarity immortal realm. You're actually a 9th step expert? How is this possible? I've seen all the 9th step experts in the Huaxia heaven domain. Why haven't I seen you before? Who are you? The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuowen with fear. He was currently heavily injured and was locked onto by Zhuowen's killing intent. He knew that he could not act rashly. Otherwise, he would face Zhuowen's merciless killing intent. Zhuowen did not answer the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's question. Instead, he asked, "You're only a human. Why do you have the power of the witch race's venomous insects? Answer me." As soon as Zhuowen said this, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's pupils shrank. He looked at the white-robed youth in front of him in disbelief. GU worms had always been his secret. It was by relying on the power of Gu worms that he was able to reach the peak of 8th step in just a few thousand years despite his mediocre talent. Moreover, because of his terrifying Gu worms, his strength was comparable to a half-step void sky 9th stage expert. He also had an extremely high status in the Huaxia heaven domain. Apart from the core super forces of the heaven domain, not many forces in the heaven domain dared to provoke him. How do you know about Gu worms? And what is the witch tribe? The blue-haired, blue-eyed man asked with a frown. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. It seemed that the blue-haired man did not know that the Gu worms came from the shaman tribe. However, this guy was clearly a human, so where did the Gu worms in his body come from? Also, he learned from Miao Bang's memories that the cultivation method of Gu worms was extremely harsh. If one did not have a terrifying physical body, planting Gu worms in one's body would only result in a backlash and one would become a puppet. It should be known that the sorcerer tribe was a large tribe in the untainted heavenly realm. They were ranked first among the countless tribes, and they were blessed with a powerful physical body. The sorcerer tribe's physical body was inherited from the ancestor of the sorcerer tribe, and they had a trace of the ancestor's bloodline. Their physical bodies were extremely terrifying, even more so than the devouring clans. It was said that the physical body of an ordinary sorcerer tribe member was comparable to the devouring king, who had awakened the royal bloodline. Even if the devouring clan's physical body was extremely powerful, planting Gu worms in their bodies was not 100% safe. If one was not careful, the Gu worms could backfire and turn one into a puppet. As for the human tribe, their physical bodies were naturally weak. Not to mention the sorcerer tribe, they were even inferior to the devouring clan. They were not suitable for the cultivation method of the sorcerer tribe's Gu worms. However, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man in front of him was clearly a human, but he was actually using the sorcerer tribe's Gu worms to cultivate. Moreover, he had cultivated to the peak of the void sky 8th stage. This made Zhuowen interested in this person. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took a step forward and pointed his sword finger at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's forehead. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was already severely injured, so how could he be Zhuowen's opponent? He could only watch as Zhuowen left a trace of an imprint in the depths of his soul. Slave imprint. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man glared at Zhuowen. If it weren't for the fact that you still have some value, you wouldn't even be worth being my slave. Zhuowen's tone was calm, but his eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man trembled, but he didn't dare to provoke Zhuowen. He knew that the gap between him and the white-clothed young man in front of him was too big. After planting the slave imprint in the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's soul, Zhuowen no longer paid attention to him. Instead, he leisurely landed in the main city of the Long River Galaxy. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man looked at Zhuowen's back with a trace of struggle in his eyes. In the end, he let out a long sigh and could only resign himself to his fate and follow behind Zhuowen. Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to be so strong. If it weren't for your help, the Long River Galaxy would have suffered a catastrophe. Chi hurried to welcome him, his eyes full of respect. Brother Chi, arrange a private room for me, Zhuowen said indifferently. Chi glanced at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man behind Zhuowen, thought of something, and quickly opened a luxurious private room for Zhuowen respectfully. After entering the private room, Zhuowen slowly sat down on the seat, played with the teacup on the table, and said indifferently, "The Long River Galaxy is only the outermost galaxy of the Huaxia Heaven Realm. You are a master at the peak of the 8 steps Void Realm, so why do you want to rob the Long River Galaxy?" The blue-haired, blue-eyed man's face turned ugly, and he said coldly, "I'm just doing it for fun. I don't mean anything else." Unfortunately, before the blue-haired, blue-eyed man could say anything, he clutched his hair and fell to the ground, struggling and twitching as if he was suffering from severe pain. "I've planted a slave imprint in your soul. If I want to, I can completely destroy your soul and strip you of your illusory bridge, causing you to die completely. Once you're dead, I can forcefully search your soul and obtain all your memories," Zhuowen said indifferently. I'll talk. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man hurriedly begged for mercy. He knew that the white-clothed young man in front of him was a ruthless person. Now that his life was in the hands of this person, he didn't dare to be unyielding. Zhuowen nodded, and only then did the blue-haired, blue-eyed man feel the pain in his soul disappear. He stood up and looked at the white-clothed young man in front of him with fear in his eyes. "Speak," Zhuowen said indifferently. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man hesitated for a moment before revealing the purpose of coming to the Long River Galaxy. He didn't dare to hide anything. He knew that once the white-clothed young man in front of him noticed something was wrong, he would immediately search his soul. At that time, it would be too late for him to cry. Chapter 2548. Clues about the Zhurong Jiyu. You are saying that there is a very powerful Jiyu fragment hidden in the Long River system? Zhuowen asked with a frown. After listening to the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's explanation, Zhuowen also knew that this man had come for a powerful Jiyu fragment. From the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's fervent eyes, Zhuowen could see that he was determined to obtain this Jiyu fragment. How do you know that there is a Jiyu fragment in the Long River system? And you, a mere human, how did you manage to cultivate Jiyu worms? Zhuowen looked at the blue-haired, blue-eyed man and his gaze became serious. From Miao Bang's memories, he also understood the sorcerer tribe's method of cultivating Jiyu worms. He had deduced that the sorcerer tribe's Jiyu worm cultivation method was not suitable for the human tribe. Even though Zhuowen's doppelganger had the bloodline of the Devourer King, it was not suitable for him. Plus, it was easy for him to be devoured by the Jiyu. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sighed softly. After hesitating for a moment, he finally answered, "Actually, I don't know about the shaman tribe and the cultivation method of the Jiyu worms that you mentioned. Furthermore, the Jiyu worms that I control are not particularly strong. They are all controlled by the fragments of the Jiyu worms that I obtained and formed powerful attacks." As he spoke, the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out a fiery red crystal that was the size of a fingernail from his spirit ring. This fiery red crystal looked crystal clear. It was as dazzling as a red gem. The moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out the red gem, a blue mist burst out from his body. It surrounded the red crystal as if it was worshipping the red crystal. Zhuowen looked at the red crystal in silence. Although the red crystal was not complete, he could still tell that it was a part of a Gu's body. In particular, the red crystal looked ordinary, but the energy it contained shocked even Zhuowen. Zhuowen revealed a look of pleasant surprise. The moment the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took out the red crystal, Zhuowen felt that the crystal was very familiar. Now that he had carefully observed it, an inconceivable thought appeared in his mind. A fragment of the Zhurong Jiyu? Zhuowen thought to himself. He had inherited Miao Bang's memories and knew what the Zhurong Jiyu looked like and even its aura. Back then, Zhuowen had learned from Miao Bang's memories that the Zhurong Jiyu was scattered in the Wuji Taishu of the Huaxia Heaven region. However, he had already encountered a fragment of the Zhurong Jiyu before he even entered the boundless Taishu. It seemed like he was really lucky this time. The Zhurong Jiyu was extremely powerful. Even if one didn't use it for cultivation, it was still extremely terrifying as a means of attack. Even ordinary Dao validation experts would pale in fear. After knowing the memories of Miao Bang, Zhuowen was determined to obtain the Zhurong Jiyu. His gaze also revealed a trace of passion. "You mean the other part of the fragment is in the Long River Galaxy?" Zhuowen asked calmly. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man sighed softly and nodded. "Yes, I've had this fragment for a long time and have learned some things about it. Therefore, I found the Long River Galaxy by relying on the reaction of this crystal. There must be something in the Long River Galaxy that is related to this fragment. That's why I want to occupy the Long River Galaxy and then look for something that can cause this fragment to react." The blue-haired, blue-eyed man also saw the heated expression in Zhuowen's eyes when he spoke until this point. The sigh in his heart became even denser. Immediately, he handed the red crystal in his hand to Zhuowen and said, "Sir, please treat this as my apology for offending you." Although the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's eyes were full of pain, he knew that his spirit had been planted with a slave seal by the white-clothed young man in front of him. If this person asked him to hand over this thing, he would not be able to resist. Since he was going to lose it anyway, he might as well take the initiative to hand it over. This way, he could gain back the favor of the white-clothed young man in front of him. Sure enough, after the blue-haired, blue-eyed man took the initiative to hand over the part of the Zhurong Jiyu, Zhuowen nodded with satisfaction and the former sighed softly in his heart. Zhuowen played with the red crystal in his hand, then with a wave of his sleeve, took out the slave seal from the blue-haired, blue-eyed man's spirit. The blue-haired, blue-eyed man was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply to Zhuowen. "Thank you, sir. This one is Lan Ji, the protector of Lan Qi Hall in the Taiqing immortal realm. May I know sir's name?" "Long Wen, just a rogue cultivator," Zhuowen said indifferently. When he left the Taiqing immortal realm, he caused a lot of trouble there. Zhuowen knew that if he revealed his real name, there would be a lot of trouble, so he simply used a fake name. "Sir Long." Lan Ji cupped his fists again and said cautiously, "By the way, do you know what happened in Boundless Taishu?" Zhuowen lowered his eyelids and asked indifferently. Chi had already mentioned to him that the North Dock Hall Master, perfected North Dock, had died in Boundless Taishu a few months ago. It was said that the entire Boundless Taishu was completely sealed. As for the reason, Zhuowen naturally didn't know. Since Lan Ji was an expert of the Taiqing immortal realm, he should have some understanding of what happened in Boundless Taishu. Lan Ji's eyes flickered and he said with a complicated expression, "If I'm not wrong, most of these Jiyu worms are in Boundless Taishu. These Jiyu worms are very mysterious and powerful, and they killed perfected North Dock. Of course, other than the upper echelons of the Heaven Domain, the other cultivators don't know about this at all. I only guessed it because I have a small part of the Jiyu worms." Zhuowen frowned and said coldly, "Taiqing is also involved?" Lan Ji's heart jumped. Taiqing was the ruler of the Heaven Domain in Huaxia and was respected by countless forces in the Heaven Domain. Even he didn't dare to call him Taiqing directly. Instead, he would respectfully call him Supremacy Taiqing. However, this young man in white not only called him Taiqing directly, but also spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. This made Lan Ji feel very disapproving of this young man in white. He felt that this young man in white was puffing himself up at his own cost. Even if this young man in white was powerful, he only thought that he was at most in the Life Enlightenment realm. Lan Ji was also a Life Enlightenment realm expert. Even when their palace master mentioned Taiqing, he would respectfully address him as Taiqing Honorable and would not dare to casually use his name. However, this white-clothed youth before them was clearly too arrogant. However, Lan Ji didn't dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, if this young man in white was displeased and planted a slave imprint on him again, it would be too late for him to cry. Supremacy Taiqing, Supremacy Yuqing, and Supremacy Shangqing have been in seclusion for hundreds of years and have yet to come out, Lan Ji said in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded. It seemed that Taiqing and the others weren't involved. In that case, Zhuowen was quite relieved. Taiqing's strength was unfathomable and was comparable to Sakyamuni. Chapter 2549. Planning capture. Can't other lone cultivators go in? Zhuowen asked. I'm afraid it's very difficult, unless you have a large faction backing you. If you want to go in, you only need to join Lanran Hall. The Hall Master will definitely give you a spot. Lan Ji said. A cold smile appeared on Zhuowen's face. Lan Ji was so scared that he didn't dare to speak again. He just lowered his head. There's nothing for you to do now, Scram. Zhuowen waved his hand. Lan Ji cupped his fists and let out a sigh of relief in his heart before flying away. Long Wen, I will remember you. You provoked my Lanran Hall, I won't let you go so easily. After leaving Long River Galaxy, Lan Ji looked at the Long River Galaxy behind him with hatred and malevolence. This time, he suffered a double loss. He was filled with regret. After returning, Lan Ji planned to tell Lanran Hall's Hall Master, Lan Zun, everything about the Jiyu worm. He knew that as long as he told Lan Zun would definitely take action. Of course, Lan Ji also knew that this Zhuowen was not simple. Lan Zun alone might not be his match. When the time comes, he would inform the other Hall Masters to kill this child together. Inside the room, Blackie and the Blood Immortal appeared not far away. Blackie sat on the hilt of his sword. He looked at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze and said, Kid, Are you going to let this person go just like that? He doesn't look like someone who will give up easily. Zhuo Wen waved his hand and said, I let him leave on purpose. This time, I'm returning to the heavenly region of Huaxia not only to go to the boundless Taishu to take the great void bone-refining ginseng, the 8 trigrams divining water, and the great simplicity double dragon Lingji, but also to establish my authority in the heavenly region of Huaxia. Xiao He nodded, looking at the white-clothed youth in front of her with some amazement. Since becoming an artifact cultivator, Xiao He's potential was limitless. Coupled with the fact that she never lacked resources, her cultivation speed was extremely fast and she broke through to life comprehension realm. Now, Xiao He was strong enough to break away from the Thunderfire sword, reconstruct her body, and become her master. But Xiao He knew that even if he broke through to the life comprehension realm, he was still far from being a match for the white-clothed youth before him. Looking at the handsome young man in white, Xiao He was reminded of the young master of the Zhuo family in Rattan Armor City. He had never thought that the young master could grow to such a level. It could be said that Zhuoan now stood at the peak of the 8 heavens. Besides the mysterious desolation heavenly domain and Xianmi heavenly domain, there was nothing in the 8 heavens that could threaten this white-clothed young man. The Zhurongji Yu in Miaobang's memory is in this long river galaxy. Xiao He, blood immortal, you too come with me to explore it. After saying that, Zhuoan took out the red crystal. Then, he found that the red crystal let out a hissing sound and broke through the sky. The moment Zhuoan took the red crystal, he felt that the power in the crystal was restless. Obviously, Lan Ji didn't lie to him. Even if there was no other part of the Zhurongji Yu in the Long River Galaxy, it was probably related to the Zhurongji Yu. The Zhurongji Yu is too broken. According to Miaobang's memory, the Zhurongji Yu should be the size of a palm. Now, it's only the size of a fingernail. Obviously, it's only a small part of the Zhurongji Yu. Zhuoan muttered to himself. Then, he quietly chased after the red crystal and left the room. With Zhuoan's cultivation, it was too easy for him to leave silently. After all, there wasn't even a void sky cultivator in the Long River Galaxy. This was an extremely remote planet. Most of the planet was barren and desert. There weren't many signs of life. The moment the red crystal entered the planet, it drilled into the planet's interior. Like a drill, it kept drilling into the planet's underground. Zhuoan slowly followed behind it. The Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were like meat grinders, opening a path in front. They weren't shaken off by the red crystal. After about an hour, Zhuoan landed in a space filled with magma. He knew that he should have entered the depths of the planet's core. Zhuoan's eyes slightly focused. He looked at the depths of the magma and saw that in the center of the magma, there was a huge worm. This worm was made of magma. Upon closer inspection, it was a worm made of magma. As soon as the red crystal entered the depths of the planet's core, it let out an excited hissing sound and rushed towards the magma worm. Unfortunately, Zhuoan wouldn't let the red crystal succeed. The giant hand made of divine power grabbed the red crystal. No matter how hard the red crystal struggled, it was useless. Roar. The moment the magma worm realized that Zhuoan had grabbed the red crystal, it immediately let out an angry roar. Waves of magma rushed towards Zhuoan. The Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword turned into 2 streams of light and blocked in front of Zhuoan. However, he soon found that both the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were blown away. Upon closer inspection, the tough bodies of the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword were showing signs of melting. Zhuoan, this is not ordinary magma. The temperature is too high. It almost melted the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. Xiao He's frightened voice came. Zhuoan quickly put away the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. Then, he took out the King's sword and slashed out. Instantly, the terrifying Death Chi turned into a towering Death Sword Chi and blasted on the magma. However, he soon found that the magma had fused the Death Sword Chi into a gaseous substance. Zhuoan's pupils shrank. How could the magma be so terrifying? The temperature was definitely not ordinary magma. Is it because of the Zhurongji Yu? Zhuoan's eyes flickered. In Miaobang's memory, the Zhurongji Yu was the Ji Yu in the body of Zhurong, one of the 12 ancestors of sorcery in the untainted heavenly realm. It possessed the most powerful flame energy in the starry sky. Zhurong was known as the fire ancestor in the untainted heavenly realm. The flame that Zhurong controlled could burn and destroy everything in the world. Although Zhuowen thought that it was a bit exaggerated, he also knew that such a reputation represented how terrifying and powerful Zhurong's flame energy was. The Zhurong Jiyu was the source of Zhurong's energy. Although only a part of the Zhurong Jiyu was hidden in the magma, Zhuowen also knew that the magma in the core of the earth had been subtly transformed into a terrifying energy by the Zhurong Jiyu. Zhuowen even felt an aura similar to the way of heaven in the magma. Let's go. This is its space. We will be at a disadvantage if we fight here. Chapter 2550. Fighting the Zhurong Jiyuzhuowen's sword qi was extremely powerful, but unfortunately, in front of the magma Jiyu, it was like scratching an itch, not worth mentioning at all. When Zhuowen quickly rushed towards the surface, the magma behind him turned into a terrifying giant hand and grabbed at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy, but he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis and used it to block behind him, barely blocking the giant magma hand. With the help of Bloodscale, he had already unlocked more than 8,000 of the 9,999 restrictions in the phagocytosis. Now, the phagocytosis's power was not what it used to be. Moreover, he had a lot of Dao fruits on him. After unlocking more than 8,000 restrictions, he refined 3 Dao fruits into the phagocytosis, causing the Dao aura inside the phagocytosis to become even more intense and terrifying. Although the phagocytosis's power was not what it used to be, the moment it blocked the giant magma hand, Zhuowen's heart still trembled. This was because even the phagocytosis was shaking violently, as if it would collapse at any time. Fortunately, the phagocytosis was not an ordinary treasure. Although it was shaking violently, it still protected Zhuowen and smoothly left the surface. Zhuowen jumped up and immediately jumped out of the planet, floating in the starry sky hundreds of millions of miles away. He looked down at the seemingly ordinary planet below with a dignified expression. Zhuowen was sure that the magma inside the planet's core contained fragments of the Zhurong Jiyu. However, he found it strange that the Zhurong Jiyu fragment that Lan Ji gave him was also a fragment of the Zhurong Jiyu. Why was the Zhurong Jiyu fragment that Lan Ji gave him not so powerful, but the Zhurong Jiyu fragment inside the planet's core was so terrifying? It should be because of the magma in the planet's core. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. Since the Zhurong Jiyu fragment had turned into fragments, it must have experienced a world-shaking battle and finally been shattered by some almighty expert. Zhurong should have fallen along with it. A broken Zhurong Jiyu fragment naturally didn't have much energy, but once it could be nourished with magma or flame energy, the Zhurong Jiyu fragment's power would naturally slowly recover and become stronger. This was also why the Zhurong Jiyu fragment in Zhuowen's hand was not so powerful, but the Zhurong Jiyu fragment inside the planet's Zhurong Jiyu fragment was so terrifying. Rumble. Rumble. While Zhuowen was floating in the starry sky, the planet below him suddenly trembled, and then burst. A vast amount of fiery red magma surging out like a giant wave in the sea. It was extremely terrifying. The area affected by the magma was simply too large. The nearby planets with life were all enveloped by it, and they were instantly annihilated into nothingness. Zhuowen Zhurong Jiyu fragment and Zhurong Jiyu fragment Zhurong Jiyu. Even if it was just a fragment, it still possessed such terrifying energy. Especially after the Zhurong Jiyu fragment soaked the magma energy, it was no longer ordinary magma energy. Even Zhuowen Zhurong Jiyu felt that it was extremely difficult to deal with. I have to draw the Zhurong Jiyu fragment away. Otherwise, the Long River Galaxy may be destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Zhuowen Zhurong Gu's eyes were solemn, and he immediately flew out of the Long River Galaxy. Roar. The endless magma turned into a river that crossed the entire galaxy, following closely behind Zhuowen Zhurong Jiyu. It also erupted with a deafening roar, attracting the attention of all the cultivators in the galaxy. Chi walked out of the main city and looked at the huge river of magma and the white-clothed young man in front of it. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Zhuo, Brother Zhuo really knows how to cause trouble. Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu landed in the starry sky far away from the Long River galaxy and stopped, looking at the river of magma that was chasing after him with a solemn gaze. Roar. When the river of magma saw Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu stop, it immediately set off a terrifying wave of magma and swept towards Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu. Waning son of the sea. Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu pointed at the starry sky, and suddenly, waves of purple energy spread out. Then, the space under Zhuo and Zhurong Gu's feet turned into an endless purple ocean. At the end of the purple ocean, a mysterious purple sun slowly rose. At this moment, the space-time of the purple ocean formed a strange boundary, completely isolating it from the space-time outside the purple ocean. The moment the river of magma swept into the purple ocean, it was affected by the space-time imprisonment power of the purple ocean, and its speed slowed down infinitely. Waves of purple water surged, drowning the river of magma. Unfortunately, the purple waves were quickly annihilated by the river of magma. Then, the river of magma began to wreak havoc in the purple ocean boundary. Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu stood under the purple sun and looked at the purple ocean boundary around him, trembling violently. His eyes narrowed. He still underestimated the power of the Zhurong Jiyu fragment. It was the first time he saw his space-time ability produce such a violent abnormality, as if it would be broken at any time. Humph. Break for me. Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu snorted coldly and pointed his finger downwards. Suddenly, the purple sun fell rapidly and slammed heavily on the river of magma. The purple sun and the fiery red magma immediately entangled together. Then, Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu was surprised to find that the terrifying purple sun was blocked by the river of magma. Roar. The river of magma let out a terrifying roar, and then Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu found that the purple sun had collapsed. Then, the vast purple ocean boundary around him collapsed into countless purple powder. Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu could not help but retreat thousands of steps, looking at the river of magma with a gloomy gaze. Since Zhuo and Zhurong Jiyu had reached the life enlightenment state, this was the first time his spacetime ability had been broken. It was obvious that the power of the Zhurong Jiyu fragment was beyond Zhuo and Gu's imagination. It seems that I can only use that move. I really didn't expect that a mere Zhurong Jiyu fragment would force me to use this move. Zhuo and Zhurong Gu's gaze was gloomy. Then, he took a deep breath and stepped forward instead of retreating. He bent his right hand and pointed at the sky above. In an instant, the surrounding space began to distort. Waves of heavenly energy that surpassed the energy of the universe poured out from the deepest part of the universe and condensed above Zhuo and Zhurong Gu's right hand. An invisible human finger that was hundreds of feet long was constantly condensing and forming. The surface of this human finger exuded a strong heavenly energy and daoist rhyme. Slaughtering Dao finger. Zhuowen Zhurong Jiyu shouted in his heart and used the first move of the slaughtering Dao finger. The slaughtering Dao finger was very powerful. It was clearly stated that if the slaughtering Dao finger was perfected, it could kill the heavenly Dao master. Even if the heavenly Dao master was only at the first step of the Dao validation realm, he had crossed the threshold of the Dao validation and was above the 8 heavens. He was not so easy to kill. However, the slaughtering Dao finger was said to be able to kill the heavenly Dao master. This showed how terrifying the power of the slaughtering Dao finger was. Boom. Chapter 2551. Refining Bang. 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 A series of explosions resounded in the starry sky. Then, the starry sky distorted and collapsed, creating an extremely terrifying distortion zone. The magma river, which had always been successful, collapsed and turned into nothingness, revealing a fiery red crystal in the depths of the magma. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He condensed a divine power hand and plunged it into the magma, grabbing the fiery red crystal. Poochie. The terrifying recoil directly hit Zhuowen's chest through the divine power hand, causing Zhuowen to spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale and his eyes dimmed. Fortunately, although the recoil was terrifying, Zhuowen still managed to grab the fiery red crystal and immediately retreated, avoiding the terrifying distortion zone. Although the slaughtering Dao finger is powerful, it consumes too much of my energy. After retreating to a safe distance, Zhuowen immediately took out a divine elixir from his spiritual ring and swallowed it. His pale face became slightly rosier. Although Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the life enlightenment realm and the mysterious life divine power in his body was much stronger than ordinary life enlightenment realm cultivators, the slaughtering Dao finger was definitely not ordinary. Now, Zhuowen could only use the slaughtering Dao finger once at most, and his divine power was almost exhausted. If he wanted to use the slaughtering Dao finger twice, it would be very difficult. Of course, Zhuowen knew that as long as his cultivation improved and reached the life enlightenment realm, he should be able to use the slaughtering Dao finger several times. Zhuowen looked at the fiery red crystal in his hand and revealed a satisfied look. The fiery red crystal in his hand was about the size of 2 fingernails. It was twice as big as the red crystal given to him by Lan Ji. The moment Zhuowen took out the red crystal given to him by Lan Ji, Zhuowen discovered that the 2 crystals were emitting an extremely hot temperature and dazzling red light at the same time. Then, the 2 red crystals attracted each other and finally merged together, forming a red bead. Zhuowen looked at the red bead in his hand silently. He knew very well that the red bead was not the complete Zhurong Jiyu, but only a part of it. Moreover, Zhuowen, who had obtained Miao Bang's memories, knew that the Zhurong Jiyu was extremely difficult to tame. Even the powerful Miao Bang was not confident that he could refine the complete Zhurong Jiyu. However, if it was only a part of the Zhurong Jiyu, refining it would be much easier. In Miao Bang's memory, the Jiyu refinement method was blood refining technique. The so-called blood refinement method was to fuse the host's blood essence into the Jiyu worm, causing the Jiyu worm to be imperceptibly tainted with the host's aura. In the end, the blood would dissolve in water, causing the Jiyu worm to completely rely on the host and be completely under the host's control. However, the Zhurong Jiyu was not an ordinary Jiyu. Miao Bang's memory also mentioned that if one wanted to refine the Zhurong Jiyu using the blood refinement method, one must persevere and proceed step by step. Otherwise, the Zhurong Jiyu was likely to backfire. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He cut his finger and let a drop of blood fall on the red bead. Then, the drop of blood was greedily absorbed by the red bead. Roar. The red bead seemed to be unsatisfied. It let out a roar, and immediately, a red mist burst out from the red bead, forming a huge strange beast head. It suddenly rushed towards Zhuowen as if it wanted to swallow Zhuowen whole. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He already knew that the Zhurong Jiyu was not so easy to tame, so he was already prepared. He immediately summoned the everlasting ice lotus, and a terrifying ice power shrouded the beast. The strange beast head formed by the blood mist immediately shrank back the moment it was shrouded by the ice power, as if it was extremely afraid of the ice power released by the everlasting ice lotus. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. The Zhurongjiyu was the fire ancestor, so it naturally controlled the power of fire. The everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice, so it was the coldest thing in the world. The everlasting ice lotus contained a powerful ice power, so it naturally had an extremely strong restraining effect on the Zhurongjiyu. Zhuowen rolled up his sleeves and placed the red bead inside the everlasting ice lotus, then kept it in the spirit ring. The blood refinement method was to proceed step by step, so it could not be rushed. Otherwise, it would be easy to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Zhuowen planned to provide a drop of blood essence to the red bead every day. After 49 days, he would take out the Zhurongjiyu and see if he could refine it. During the next period, Zhuowen drove the spacetime wheel away from the Long River Galaxy and headed toward boundless Taishu. However, Zhuowen could reduce the speed of the spacetime wheel to the minimum and let Xiao He help him control the flight of the spacetime wheel while he refined the Zhurongjiyu and cultivated in the spacetime wheel. After 49 days, the spacetime wheel was only a few galaxies away from boundless Taishu, so Zhuowen stopped. He chose a remote, desolate planet and sank into the depths of the planet's core. In the endless world of lava, the everlasting ice lotus floated above Zhuowen's head, and a powerful ice power separated the surrounding lava without any hindrance. Zhuowen took out the red bead, his eyes flickering. After 49 days of blood refinement, Zhuowen could clearly feel that the Zhurongjiyu had developed a sense of dependence on him. Zhuowen knew that now was the best time to refine the Zhurongjiyu. At the thought of this, Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of divine fire. The endless mysterious birth divine force provided the divine fire with a steady stream of energy. When the divine fire landed on the Zhurongjiyu, the latter let out a shrill shriek that was filled with fear and anger. Zhuowen snorted and waved his sleeve, revealing 81 beast bone array discs. Then, he set up a huge level 9 confinement array inside the planet's core. As long as there was a level 9 confinement array, the Zhurongjiyu would not be able to sense the huge commotion in the planet's core space, no matter how big the storm was. Zhuowen was not surprised by the strong reaction of the Zhurongjiyu. After all, the Zhurongjiyu belonged to one of the 12 ancestral sorcerers. It was the Jiyu of one of the top experts in the Primeval universe. Even if he only had a portion of the fragments, it was still not to be underestimated. Roar! 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 The Zhurongjiyu let out a series of roars, and then the endless lava in the planet's core space was stirred up. It was like thousands of dragons emerging from the sea, blasting toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. The everlasting ice lotus guarded him tightly while he urged the divine fire to refine the Zhurongjiyu. Chapter 2552. Benefits. Of course, this did not mean that the Zhu Rongworm did not resist him. The everlasting ice lotus was extremely powerful. Although the magma was terrifying, it was blocked by the everlasting ice lotus. And because of the strong ice power contained in the ice lotus, the power of the Zhurongjiyu worm had been weakened by a lot. As time passed, Zhuowen frowned. He realized that although his divine fire was getting stronger, the Zhu Rongworm did not show any signs of being refined. Moreover, as he refined it, the resistance of the Zhu Rongworm became more intense. This made Zhuowen a little distressed. It seems that I can only use the secret method of blood refining fusion from Miaobang's memory. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Blood refining fusion was an advanced secret method of blood refining. At the same time, it was a secret method that had no choice. If the sorcerer tribe wanted to let the Jiyu worm reside in their bodies and step on the path of cultivating their bodies, the first step was to tame the Jiyu worm. On the other hand, the sorcerer tribe usually used the blood refinement method. 49 days was enough to successfully tame any Jiyu worm. Of course, if there were some extremely powerful Jiyu worms, the short 49 days of blood refining might not be enough to tame the Jiyu worm. Then, there was only one way, and that was blood refining fusion. Blood refining fusion was when the host fused the blood essence in his body into the Jiyu worm in a short period of time, causing the GU worm's dependence on the host to increase instantly. With this increased dependence, the host could quickly tame the GU worm. Once the GU worm was tamed, it would naturally be a success. However, the side effects of blood-refining fusion were great. If it was not successful, it would easily backfire and cause serious injuries. Moreover, the blood essence would be sucked dry by the GU worm. It could be said that it was a risky secret method. Zhuowen hesitated whether to use this secret method. After all, he was not from the sorcerer tribe. After taming the Zhu Rongworm, he could not cultivate at all. He only wanted to use the power of the Zhu Rongworm. In addition, the cost of refining it was too high. Therefore, Zhuowen was indeed hesitant. Let's do it. This Zhu Rong Gu is extremely powerful. If I can absorb this Zhu Rong Gu, my trump card will become much stronger. Zhuowen's eyes flashed as he summoned the black-robed Zhuowen. He planned to use the black-robed Zhuowen's blood essence to perform the secret technique, blood fusion. The doppelganger had the bloodline of King Devourer. Therefore, its blood essence was much stronger than the original human. Therefore, using the doppelganger's blood essence to perform the secret skill blood fusion was naturally the most suitable choice. Moreover, if he finds that something is wrong, he can stop it in time. After all, the everlasting ice lotus is under his control. Zhuowen's original body landed not far away. He formed a seal with both hands and set up many formations in the surroundings again. These formations were all meant to counter the Zhurong worm. Once something went wrong with the Zhurong Gu, Zhuowen would activate these magic formations immediately to prevent the Zhurong Gu from devouring his clones. At this moment, the doppelganger's eyes were extremely solemn. He cut a wound on his right index finger. Then, streams of blood essence flowed into the Zhurong Gu through the wound. The Zhurong Gu, which was originally restless, calmed down immediately after receiving the blood essence from the doppelganger. Zhuowen looked at the Zhurong Gu that had calmed down and heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the secret skill blood fusion was really useful. However, when Zhuowen saw the doppelganger's gradually pale face, his eyes darkened. It seemed that the blood fusion required a huge amount of blood essence. It had only been a while, but the doppelganger's face was already pale. I have to refine this Zhurong Gu as soon as possible. Zhuowen didn't dare to think too much. He spat out a mouthful of godly fire and tried his best to refine the Zhurong Gu. At this moment, the Zhurong Gu was extremely quiet and didn't show any signs of resistance. Obviously, the secret skill blood fusion did play a big role. Half an hour later, Zhuowen finally refined the Zhurong Gu completely. The doppelganger's face was pale and he fell to the ground with a plop, his breath weak. Zhuowen immediately took out the heavenly starry sky essence and poured it into the doppelganger's mouth. After drinking several bottles of heavenly starry sky essence, the doppelganger barely regained some strength, but it would still take a long time for him to fully recover. The effect of the heavenly starry sky essence is really not as good as before. Zhuowen's eyes were complicated. Since his original body had advanced to the enlightenment realm, and his doppelganger had reached the three extremes, the heavenly starry sky essence, a precious treasure liquid, had become dispensable to Zhuowen. It should be known that a drop of heavenly starry sky essence could restore a cultivator to his peak state. Its effect was heaven-defying, but unfortunately, the effect of the heavenly starry sky essence was only applicable to cultivators below the void sky 9th step. Now that Zhuowen was a cultivator who had reached the void sky 9th step, the effect of the heavenly starry sky essence on him was really minimal, especially for his doppelganger, which had almost no effect. Whoosh! The fiery red bead flew over and landed in front of the doppelganger. Then, it kept circling around the doppelganger, looking extremely excited and affectionate. It seems that the Zhurong Gu has absorbed the doppelganger's blood essence. It's actually so close to the doppelganger. Zhuowen's original body's eyes flickered. He nodded and immediately put away the everlasting ice lotus. The moment he completely refined the Zhurong Gu, the boiling magma in the Earth's core completely calmed down. Then, Zhuowen's original body found that the magma in the Earth's core, under the control of the Zhurong Gu, surrounded the doppelganger. Although the temperature of the magma was terrifying, it could not cause any harm to the doppelganger. Moreover, Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised to find that as the magma wrapped around the doppelganger, the flame energy in the magma was constantly absorbed by the Zhurong-Ji, and it actually helped the doppelganger recover its strength. Although the doppelganger's physical body was strong and had the bloodline of the Devourer King, the blood fusion secret technique was too terrifying. Even the doppelganger was weak because of the excessive loss of blood essence. However, the Zhurong-Ji was not bad. While absorbing the flame energy in the magma, it also fed the doppelganger a pure energy, which reduced the doppelganger's weakness by a lot. Moreover, Zhuowen did not know whether it was an illusion or not, but as the Zhurong-Ji transmitted this pure energy to the doppelganger seemed to have become weaker. Not only did Zhuowen feel that the weakness had disappeared, but the doppelganger's strength also seemed to have improved a little. Feeling the benefits, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly lit up. I didn't expect the Zhurong-Ji to have such benefits. I'll leave my doppelganger here to recuperate first. My original body will go to the boundless Taishu first. Zhuowen took a deep look at the doppelganger and the Zhurong-Ji, which were wrapped in magma, and decided to leave the doppelganger and the Zhurong-Ji here. Chapter 2553. Black Market. Although the Zhurong-Ji was only a Ji worm, it was not an ordinary Ji worm. It was a Ji worm from the ancestral sorcerer's body. Zhuowen naturally would not provoke the main body of the Zhurong-Ji worm if it was not necessary. Especially after inheriting the memories of Miao Bang, he knew very well that each of the 12 ancestral sorcerers was an extremely terrifying existence. Furthermore, he had only obtained a small part of the Zhurong-Ji worm. Just this small part of the Zhurong-Ji worm already had such great power. There was no doubt that the main body of the Zhurong-Ji worm was even more terrifying. Zhuowen did not dare to let his guard down. In addition, Zhuowen's main purpose this time was to find the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng, Great Simplicity Double Dragon Ganoderma, and 8 trigrams Divination Yang Water. If he provoked the Zhurong-Ji worm, Zhuowen would not be able to find these 3 level 9 divine herbs with peace of mind. When Zhuowen left the barren planet and entered the periphery of Wuji Taishu, he immediately felt a solemn and desolate atmosphere. Wuji Taishu was a star domain that looked like a ruin and occupied an extremely vast area. Zhuowen could see the occasional glimmer of starlight in the huge Wuji Taishu from afar. Of course, these starlights only occupied a very small portion of the boundless Taishu. Most of the boundless Taishu was pitch black, so one would have to get closer to see the pitch-black parts of the boundless Taishu clearly. The periphery of Wuji Taishu was shrouded in a misty fog, which made Wuji Taishu appear even more mysterious. At this moment, the periphery of Wuji Taishu was extremely lively. Many cultivators were bustling around the periphery. At the same time, Zhuowen also saw many buildings and cave abodes in the periphery, which were obviously built by these cultivators temporarily. Furthermore, Zhuowen discovered that most of these cultivators were moving around the periphery. No one dared to enter Wuji Taishu. "Senior, you look very unfamiliar. You must have just arrived at Wuji Taishu, right?" Suddenly, a slightly shaky voice was heard and attracted Zhuowen's attention. Zhuowen turned his head and looked at the honest young man in front of him. He nodded and said, "Yes." This honest-looking young man's cultivation level was not very high. He was only true God 3 disasters and had not even reached the void sky realm. Zhuowen could see the reverence in his eyes. Clearly, this simple and honest youth should have noticed that Zhuowen was a void sky cultivator. Although Zhuowen had concealed most of his aura, ordinary people would not be able to see through his cultivation. Although this simple and honest young man's cultivation was not high, his eyesight was not bad. He could tell that Zhuowen was not ordinary, so naturally, he was very respectful to Zhuowen. "Senior must have come to the boundless Taishu to search for treasures, right? However, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, Senior. The boundless Taishu has been sealed off by the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm. Ordinary people can't enter without a strong background." The honest-looking young man looked disappointed when he said that. He was an itinerant cultivator and was not strong enough, so he could only wander around the periphery of Wuji Taishu. Zhuowen nodded. He had already inquired about this from Chi Chi and Lan Ji. However, if Senior wants to enter the boundless Taishu, I have a way to let you in, the honest-looking young man suddenly said. Zhuowen exclaimed softly and looked deeply at the honest-looking young man until the latter's scalp turned numb. Zhuowen then said leisurely, if you know the way to enter the boundless Taishu, why don't you go in and tell me instead? The honest-looking young man did not dare hide anything and smiled bitterly. Senior, I'm only at the true God realm. Even if I enter the boundless Taishu, I'll be courting death. You might not know this, but there are quotas to enter the boundless Taishu, and I happen to know the black market for quotas. Although I know the channels, I'm embarrassed. The quotas are easily worth millions of divine stones. I don't have that many divine stones to squander. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He took another look at the honest-looking young man and nodded. If there really is a quota to enter the boundless Taishu, I won't treat you badly if you take me there. As he spoke, Zhuowen casually tossed a divine stone to the honest-looking young man. When the honest-looking young man saw that it was actually a high-grade divine stone, his eyes instantly revealed an expression of wild joy. He hurriedly nodded and bowed. The periphery of Wuji Taishu was extremely lively and prosperous. There were more cultivators here than in ordinary galaxies, and all of them were powerhouses. One could easily encounter a void sky powerhouse. Compared to the Long River Galaxy, this place was simply a paradise for powerhouses. The honest-looking young man quickly led Zhuowen into a huge meteorite continent. As soon as Zhuowen entered the meteorite continent, he discovered that there was a level 9 array formation among the countless restrictions on the meteorite continent. Moreover, this level 9 array formation was similar to an array formation that gathered starry sky energy. The starry sky energy on the meteorite continent was extremely rich. Compared to other places, this meteorite continent was like a paradise. The honest-looking young man quietly led Zhuowen into a dark alley. It was a dead end. The honest-looking young man came to the dead end and gently knocked on the wall in front of the alley a few times. Then, a huge opening appeared on the wall, just big enough for one person to enter. Huang Qi, we have another guest. On the other side of the alley, a black-clothed man appeared and glanced at Zhuowen behind the honest-looking young man. The honest-looking young man scratched his head and hurriedly nodded. Yes, this senior is also here for a quota. The black-clothed man nodded. After sending the honest-looking young man away, he looked at Zhuowen and said indifferently, let's go. Zhuowen didn't mind and followed the black-clothed man inside. The moment he entered, the alley behind him turned into a dead end again. What appeared in front of Zhuowen was a deep corridor. On both sides of the corridor were fences made of purple sandalwood. It looked very antique. Along the corridor, Zhuowen followed the black-clothed man. During this time, the two of them didn't say a word. At the end of the corridor, a door appeared in front of Zhuowen. The black-clothed man pointed at the door and said, inside is the black market. If you want a quota, you can naturally get it by paying a sufficient price. Speaking up to here, the black-clothed man spread out his hands and said to Zhuowen, the entrance fee of the black market is 1,000 high-grade divine stones. Zhuowen frowned slightly. Although he felt that the entrance fee of the black market was a bit of a scam, Zhuowen still paid the 1,000 high-grade divine stones to the black-clothed man. After the black-clothed man put away the 1,000 high-grade divine stones, he nodded and took out a mask. After letting Zhuowen put it on, he opened the door. The moment Zhuowen entered the door, he felt a powerful divine sense land on his body. It seemed that after discovering that Zhuowen wasn't special, these divine senses all withdrew. Chapter 2554. An old friend. The divine consciousness lingered on Zhuowen for a quarter of an hour before slowly withdrawing. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes as he felt that the divine consciousness was somewhat familiar. Although he felt that the divine consciousness was very familiar, he could not recall who it was at the moment. Furthermore, the black market was filled with all sorts of people, so it was really impossible to find the owner of the divine consciousness. The space inside the black market was not big, only about the size of 10 ordinary rooms. There were dozens of people inside, and most of them were wearing masks. The masks were rather strange as they could block divine consciousness, so others could not use their divine consciousness to see their true appearance and aura. Therefore, although Zhuowen wanted to find the owner of the familiar divine consciousness, he knew that it would be very difficult for him to find the owner of the divine consciousness unless the owner told him. This space was extremely hidden. When Zhuowen tried to scan it with his divine consciousness, he discovered that there was a divine restriction array at the edge of the space. With Zhuowen's current powerful divine consciousness, the divine restriction array did not have much effect on Zhuowen. If Zhuowen wanted to, he could forcibly break the divine restriction array. Of course, Zhuowen naturally would not do that. If he did, he would probably be immediately chased out of the black market by the owner. There were many seats in the black market space. These seats were centered around a circular platform in the center and spread out in all directions like a flower. The circular platform was the stamen, and the surrounding seats were the petals. The number of seats here was much more than the number of cultivators. Zhuowen casually found a remote corner and sat down. The moment he sat down, a figure came to Zhuowen's side and sat down next to him. "Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to come to Boundless Taishu as well." A familiar divine consciousness entered Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen was slightly surprised and immediately sized up the figure in front of him seriously. Although the figure was also wearing a mask, his clothes were rather shabby and did not look like the clothes of an expert. At that moment, the person was openly looking at Zhuowen. "Brother Ziwei?" Zhuowen asked uncertainly. The person nodded slightly and said, "That's me. I guessed it was you because I sensed the aura of extreme energy from you." Zhuowen nodded. "So that's how it is." His clone wasn't by his side, so he wasn't sensitive to extreme energy. Of course, although Zhuowen's true body was not at the Three Extremities realm, his doppelganger had been with his true body for a long time, so it was inevitable that there would be some aura of extreme energy on his body. However, the extreme energy on Zhuowen's body was very thin. If Crepe Myrtle Star King had not reached 3 extreme levels, he would not have been able to sense the thin extreme energy on Zhuowen's body. "Brother Ziwei, you can call me Long Wen from now on. I once escaped from the heaven realm of Huaxia, and I don't get along well with some of the forces in the heaven realm of Huaxia, so..." Zhuowen reminded him telepathically. Crepe Myrtle Star King nodded, indicating that he understood. Then, he changed his words and said, "Brother Long, you must have come here for the Boundless Taishu quota, right?" Zhuowen nodded in agreement. However, Crepe Myrtle Star King said quietly, "Brother Long, there's one more thing you might not know. I've been in the heaven realm of Huaxia for decades and have met many cultivators who are cultivating toward the Three Extremities realm. I discovered that besides the two of us, I also found an expert who had reached the Three Extremities realm." Zhuowen's gaze moved, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at Crepe Myrtle Star King. Cultivating the Three Extremities realm was extremely difficult. If Zhuowen hadn't had the alchemy fire, it would have been unknown if he could have reached the Three Extremities realm. Crepe Myrtle Star King would probably have been in a similar situation. Apart from him and Crepe Myrtle Star King, there was actually someone else who had reached the Three Extremities realm. Clearly, this person was not simple. Furthermore, I also heard from that senior about the specific realms and cultivation methods after the Three Extremes. However, this involves his privacy, so that senior didn't tell me at all, Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch said with a hint of regret. "Do you know who that senior is?" Zhuowen asked with a frown. He was also very curious about the realms and cultivation methods after the Three Extremities realm. Although everyone in the 8 heavens knew about the Three Extremities realm, after cultivating it to the extreme, one would at most be on par with the experts of the 2 Extremities realm of life and death. Zhuowen's doppelganger wasn't a human, but had the bloodline of the devouring clan king. Therefore, after cultivating the Three Extremities realm, it was much more abnormal than ordinary human cultivators. However, it still became a shackle for the doppelganger's cultivation. If he couldn't find the cultivation methods after the Three Extremities realm, the doppelganger would remain stagnant. Once Zhuowen's original body reached the Dao realm, he would definitely leave the doppelganger far behind. His doppelganger would also become a chicken rib. I heard that Senior is the Mountain River ancestor of the Mountain River Hall, the second hall of the 100 halls of the Tai Ching immortal realm. He resigned from the position of Hall Master a long time ago and lived in seclusion in the Tai Ching immortal realm. I heard that this senior once fought with the Tai Ching of the Hua Xia heavenly domain. He was only slightly weaker than Tai Ching. His name is well known. Crepe Myrtle Star King's eyes became mysterious as he said, "The Mountain River ancestor once told me that if I could find what he wanted in the boundless Taishu, he would share the cultivation methods after the Three Extremities realm with me." Tai Ching's strength was unfathomable. The Mountain River ancestor was only slightly weaker than Tai Ching. Zhuowen estimated that the Mountain River ancestor's strength should be on par with the middle stage of the Two Extremities realm of life and death, which was on the same level as Palace Master Wujue of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Although Crepe Myrtle Star King was also in the Three Extremities realm, he had only been in the Three Extremities realm for a few decades. Decades ago, Crepe Myrtle Star King had just survived the 20th storm and could barely fight with Great Brahma. However, after decades of consolidation, Crepe Myrtle Star King's strength was comparable to the peak of the Death Realm. There was still a gap between him and the Two Extremities realm of life and death. Although Crepe Myrtle Star King had witnessed Zhuowen defeating Great Brahma with one move, his decades of improvement made him realize that the gap between him and Zhuowen wasn't that big. He estimated that although his strength wasn't as strong as Zhuowen's, it shouldn't be too far off. Since the Mountain River ancestor was a veteran extreme grade expert, Crepe Myrtle Star King's reverence for him was obviously much stronger than Zhuowen's. Zhuowen also saw the look in Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, but he did not care too much about this. Instead, he asked, "What is the thing that the Mountain River ancestor wants?" Chapter 2555. Flaming Bug. A flaming bug? Zhuowen frowned slightly. Wasn't the Mountain River Patriarch talking about the Zhurongjiyu? Moreover, it was the main body of the Zhurongjiyu. In Miaobang's memory, the main body of the Zhurongjiyu was a flaming bug. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He didn't tell Crepe Star Sovereign about the origin of the Zhurongjiyu. Instead, he wondered why the Mountain River Patriarch wanted the Zhurongjiyu. Although he knew that the abnormality in the boundless Taishu might be related to the Zhurongjiyu, there should be almost no one in the Eight Heavens who knew the value of the Zhurongjiyu. Even if someone else caught the Zhurongjiyu, it would be useless. They would not know how to deal with it. Of course, the main body of the Zhurongjiyu was not to be trifled with. Even Zhuowen wasn't confident that he could get his hands on the main body of the Zhurongjiyu. "Brother Long, the slot auction is about to begin." Crepe Myrtle Star's words immediately interrupted Zhuowen's thoughts. Then, he saw a man wearing a mask appear on the central platform. Although the man was wearing a mask, it wasn't difficult to guess that he was an old man based on his silver hair. The old man's voice sounded rather old. This old man already knows the purpose of everyone's visit. This old man will not beat around the bush. This old man only has 5 quotas, but there are more than 50 people here. The bidding for the quotas is based on the highest bid. The top 5 with the highest bid are qualified to obtain the quotas in this old man's hands. Let's begin. The starting price is 500,000 high-grade divine stones. Each bid must be at least 10,000 higher. After saying that, the old man stood silently on the high platform and looked down at the surrounding cultivators. 510,000. 600,000. 3,000,000. As soon as the old man's voice fell, the surrounding people began to bid one after another. The price also rose, quickly rising to 5 million, which was 10 times higher than the starting price. When the price was raised to 7 million, the voices of bidding gradually died down. 7 million high-grade divine stones was already a huge sum of money. Ordinary Void Sky 7 Steps cultivators might not be able to take it out in one go, so many cultivators gave up bidding. 10 million high-grade divine stones. Suddenly, a clear voice sounded out, attracting everyone's attention. In the front seat, a petite woman wearing a mask raised the price by 3 million in one breath, which shocked everyone present. Zhuowen looked at the petite girl's back, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. 11 million high-grade divine stones. Just as Zhuowen finished shouting, the petite woman turned around and glared fiercely at Zhuowen. Then, she angrily added another 1,000,000 high-grade divine stone, and looked at Zhuowen with the gaze of a victor. After the price reached 10 million, there was basically no other voice. The only bidders were Zhuowen and the petite masked woman in front of him. Zhuowen did not care about the gaze that the lady shot over. He shook his head and no longer spoke. He had only come here for the quota. With his current price, he was already ranked second. Naturally, he would not bid against this woman in a fit of pique. As for the Purple Star Monarch, he had already shouted once before. His bid was ranked fourth, so he could also get a spot. When the petite woman saw that Zhuowen did not say anything, the smile in her eyes became even wider. Then, she turned her head and simply ignored Zhuowen. After the old man called out 3 times, the 5 spots were all finalized. The old man also sent someone to give a black jade token to Zhuowen and the other 4. This jade token was clearly the symbol of a spot. Zhuowen and the Crepe Myrtle Star Monarch each received a spot. As for the other 3 spots, besides the petite masked woman, the other spot was a woman with a tranquil temperament who sat beside the petite woman. The last spot fell into the hands of a black-clothed man. After the black-clothed man obtained the spot, he hurriedly left the black market. Moreover, Zhuowen found with his divine sense that after the black-clothed man left, several people in the black market followed him. Obviously, they were up to no good. It's common for people to eat each other in the black market. Brother Long, let's go. The Purple Star Monarch also noticed the situation after the black-clothed man left and said indifferently. Zhuowen did not move. His gaze fell on the petite woman and the other 2 women who were about to get up and leave. He revealed a thoughtful look. The Purple Star Monarch noticed Zhuowen's gaze and said with a smile, "Brother Long, could it be that you have your eyes on those 2 women?" Zhuowen shook his head and said indifferently, "No, these 2 women give me a very familiar feeling. They are a bit like my acquaintances. Let's go and take a look." The Purple Star Monarch shrugged and did not say anything. He slowly followed Zhuowen and left the black market. However, the moment Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch left the black market, they also noticed that several people were quietly following behind them. When Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch completely left the black market and entered an extremely remote alley in the outside world, several people behind them immediately rushed out and blocked their way. There were a total of 4 people in front of them. The leader was a bearded man with a vast aura. He was actually an expert of the Void Sky 8 steps. The other 3 were all at the Void Sky 7 steps. After the 4 people left the black market, they took off the masks on their faces and looked at Zhuowen and the Purple Star Monarch mockingly. "Leave the jade tokens you obtained and get out of here," the bearded man said with extreme disdain. Zhuowen had concealed most of his aura. Thus, he did not appear like an expert. As for Star Monarch Crepe Myrtle, he cultivated an extreme power. If he were not fighting, he would appear no different from an ordinary cultivator. "Get out. If you dare to say another word, even if you kneel down and beg for mercy, you will still die." Zhuowen's eyes were cold. A mere cultivator of the Void Sky 8 steps actually dared to rob him. He was really tired of living. The bearded man and the other 3 had gloomy looks in their eyes. The bearded man sneered and said, "Arrogant guy, I only planned to cripple you and not kill you. Now, I think you should pay the price for your arrogance." With that, the bearded man suddenly stepped out and threw a punch. The fist energy was condensed to the extreme and set off gusts of wind. It was like an angry dragon coming out of the sea and blasted towards Zhuowen. The other 3 did not make a move. Instead, they watched the show with mocking eyes. The bearded man was very powerful. The 3 of them had seen it with their own eyes. In their opinion, the white-clothed young man in front of them was undoubtedly going to die. Unfortunately, the moment the bearded man's fist landed on Zhuowen's left cheek, he immediately felt an unprecedented sense of danger. Then, his right hand suddenly lost all feeling and pain filled his entire body. Chapter 2556. Betrayal. How is this possible? You The bearded man's remaining head looked at the white-clothed young man in disbelief. Before he could even react, his body had already been reduced to dust. The three cultivators who were watching the show watched all this in a daze. The moment the bearded man punched out, the white-clothed young man also punched out. Moreover, Zhuo Wen's punch was different from the full-bearded man's powerful punch. Zhuo Wen's punch was very ordinary, and the speed of his punch was even slower. However, the moment the two fists collided, the white-clothed young man was unscathed. He didn't even move his feet, but the bearded man's body collapsed with a loud bang. "I've already warned you before, but unfortunately, you didn't listen." Zhuowen shook his head. He reached out with his right hand and grabbed the bearded man's head, which was still in shock. Then, a violent energy invaded his head and completely destroyed it. Even the illusory heavenly bridge and divine soul in his body were completely destroyed. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The moment Zhuowen cleanly destroyed the bearded man, the three cultivators immediately fled outside. This white-clothed young man was too terrifying. He had actually destroyed the bearded man with 8 void sky steps with a flip of his hand. How powerful did he need to be to do this? Unfortunately, the three cultivators did not manage to escape far. Zhuo Wen waved his hand and shot out 3 streams of mysterious life divine power, smashing into the bodies of the 3 cultivators. Instantly, the 3 of them were destroyed. The mysterious life divine power was far superior to the divine power of any cultivator below 9 void sky steps. It would be strange if a mere 7 void sky steps cultivator could block it. Purple Star Sovereign wasn't surprised that 4 cultivators were destroyed with a flip of his hand. If it were him, he could also easily destroy the 4 of them. "Brother Purple Star, you can leave first. I still have some things to do. I'll contact you after I'm done." After Zhuowen finished speaking, he left the alley. Purple Star Sovereign pondered for a moment before quietly leaving the place. Outside the meteorite continent, 2 beautiful figures shot out like streams of light. Unfortunately, they were quickly intercepted by a group of people. The leader of this group of people was a blue-haired, blue-eyed man. There were 7 or 8 people following behind him. 2 of them had auras that were no weaker than the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. One of them was even stronger than the blue-haired, blue-eyed man. "Lan Ji of Lan Chi Hall? Why are you blocking our way?" The petite masked woman stared at Lan Ji and said in an unfriendly tone. Lan Ji sneered at the petite girl, "Miss Lian Meng from Virtue Hall and Miss Jing Hai from 9 Firmaments Hall, Lord Lanran invites you in." The other black-clothed man standing behind Lan Ji cupped his fists and said in a more courteous manner than Lan Ji, "This humble one is an elder of the North Dock Hall, Chen Yu. Under the orders of the Hall Master, I would like to meet Miss Lian Meng." "Miss Lian Meng, the Hall Master of Yin Qin Hall invites you in," the other man with a gloomy expression said coldly. Lian Meng looked at the 3 people and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but change. She didn't expect that the 3 halls would know about her coming out. Her whereabouts were clearly very secretive. Apart from senior sister Jing Hai, no one else knew about it. Whoosh, whoosh. Another group of people flew over from the distance and intercepted Lian Meng and Lan Ji. "The Hall Master of Purple Cloud Hall invites you in," a purple-clothed woman cupped her fists and said to Lian Meng. "The Hall Master of Boulder Hall invites you in. The Hall Master of Desolation Hall invites you in." Voices rang out one after another, causing Lian Meng's face to turn paler and paler. There were a total of 27 people intercepting her. Each group represented a palace in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm, and they were all here for Lian Meng. "Aren't you afraid that my master will blame you for offending your superiors?" Lian Meng said with a gloomy expression. Lan Ji grinned and said, "Lady Lian Meng, if you say this to others, they might believe you, but if you say it to us, haha, I'm afraid it won't be very convincing." Yes. Hundreds of years ago, Honorable Tai Ching, Honorable Shangqing, and Honorable Yu Qing all went into seclusion at the same time. After that, there was no more news. 30 years ago, the origin of the heavenly domain, Purple Qi from the east, dissipated and disappeared. Honorable 3 purities never came out. The other palace masters all guessed that something had happened to them. Lian Meng took off her mask and narrowed her beautiful eyes. Lan Ji, you better shut your crow's beak. Nothing will happen to my master. When he comes out, you and all of you will die without a doubt. The purple-clothed woman sneered and said, Lady Lian Meng, if it weren't for your innate immortal body, we wouldn't be so polite. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the chance to speak. I think it would be best for Lady Lian Meng to follow me to meet Palace Master Zi Xia. When the purple-clothed woman said this, the others subconsciously frowned. However, Palace Master Zi Xia's strength couldn't be underestimated. Most of them didn't say anything. Lan Ji, on the other hand, sneered, Lan Ran Hall's Hall Master has invited you. Your Purple Cloud Hall had better retract your order. The purple-clothed woman's beautiful eyes turned cold, but she didn't refute. Although her cultivation wasn't afraid of Lan Ji, the Palace Master Zi Xia had behind him was stronger than Palace Master Zi Xia. However, even if Palace Master Zi Xia was stronger than Palace Master Zi Xia, there was a limit to it. The purple-clothed woman wasn't worried. If Lan Ji tried to snatch her away, she wouldn't mind fighting back. Junior sister Lian Meng, my martial brothers from Palace Master Zi Xia have also come. After all, you are Honorable Taiching's disciple. Although Honorable Taiching is in seclusion and doesn't know what's going on, these people won't dare to force you. As long as you say that you want to meet Palace Master Zi Xia, these people won't force you. Moreover, our martial brothers from Palace Master Zi Xia will protect us. Jing Hai walked behind Lian Meng and whispered to her. Lian Meng's delicate body trembled. She thought of something and looked at Jing Hai in disbelief. Senior sister Jing Hai, it's you? Seeing Lian Meng's expression, Jing Hai knew that the latter had guessed it. She sighed and said, Junior sister Lian Meng, I was forced to do this. Palace Master Zi Xia asked me to do this. You can't blame me. Lian Meng looked at Jing Hai in front of her and suddenly felt that the latter had become extremely unfamiliar. It was as if she didn't know her at all. She knew that Jing Hai must be the reason why her whereabouts were exposed. Junior sister Lian Meng, you'd better make a decision quickly. The other palaces are all tigers and wolves. They will likely not show mercy to you. However, Nine Firmaments Palace is different. I can plead for mercy on your behalf. All you need to do is choose to meet the Palace Master of Nine Firmaments Palace. Jing Hai hastily sent Chen Feng a secret vocal transmission. Lian Meng sneered again and again. However, she distanced herself from Jing Hai and said, Jing Hai, I have truly misjudged you. Originally, I had always regarded you as my best sister. However, you betrayed me. I have helped you so much in vain. Jing Hai's pretty face turned gloomy. She didn't expect Lian Meng to directly shed all pretense of cordiality with her. Lian Meng's character was originally rather weak. She didn't expect her to become so unyielding at this time. Your Palace Master Zi Xia is probably looking for me because of my innate immortal body. Before Master went into seclusion, no one dared to have any ideas about me. However, Master has been in seclusion for a long time and the heavenly domain source energy has also dissipated. You think that there's a problem with Master Zi Xia's cultivation, so you dare to have ideas about me? Chapter 2557. Boundless Heaven and Earth Talisman. As soon as Lian Meng finished speaking, she waved her jade-like hand and blasted Jing Hai behind her. The powerful energy of Void Sky 8 steps poured down mercilessly on Jing Hai. Jing Hai was already prepared and retreated in advance. At the same time, she took out an aqua-blue divine sword from her spirit ring and blasted it out. Rumble. The aqua-blue divine sword and Lian Meng's attack collided, causing an ear-piercing explosion. Jing Hai groaned and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She was immediately sent flying. On the other hand, Lian Meng remained where she was, as steady as a rock. Although Jing Hai and Lian Meng were both at the intermediate stage of Void Sky 8 steps, Jing Hai was just an ordinary cultivator while Lian Meng had an innate immortal body. Even those at the peak of Void Sky 8 steps might not necessarily be a match for her. Miss Lian Meng, you are too presumptuous. Our Nine Firmaments Palace has never mistreated you. Junior sister Jing Hai is as close as a sister to you. Now, you actually injured Jing Hai. Are you looking down on our 9 firmaments palace? A furious roar sounded from the surrounding crowd. Soon after, a black-clothed man led several cultivators and rushed towards Lian Meng. Everyone, this is a private matter of our 9 firmaments palace. Junior sister Lian Meng attacked me for no reason. Our 9 firmaments palace will repay this debt. If anyone dares to help Miss Lian Meng at this juncture, our 9 firmaments palace will not rest until one of us is dead. After Jing Hai was blasted back, she stabilized herself and immediately sent a voice transmission to the surrounding crowd. All of this happened too suddenly. Before the surrounding crowd could even react, the experts of 9 firmaments palace had already rushed out and pounced towards Lian Meng. By the time they reacted, Jing Hai had already taken the initiative and explained the grudge clearly. If anyone interfered, they would be interfering with the private matter of 9 firmaments palace. They would not rest until one of them was dead. For a moment, many of the forces from the other palaces were in a state of panic and did not dare to move forward. Of course, these indecisive forces were not as powerful as 9 firmaments palace. They did not dare to offend 9 firmaments palace too ruthlessly. Not rest until one of us is dead. Today, I will represent Purple Cloud Palace to experience 9 firmaments palace's relentlessness. Today, I'll snatch it. The purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Hall sneered and flew out with the experts from the Purple Cloud Hall. Lan Ji sneered, not bothering to speak any nonsense. Together with the purple-clothed woman, all the masters of Azen Hall also moved out. Aside from these 3 palaces, the other palaces did not dare to make a move. Instead, they just watched from the sidelines. 9 Firmaments Palace, Lanran Palace, and Purple Cloud Palace were among the top 10 palaces in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm. Moreover, these 3 great palaces had all sent experts at the half-step Void Sky 9th step. Each of their lineups was terrifyingly powerful and couldn't be underestimated. As for the experts sent by the other palaces, they were barely satisfactory. Although the people sent by the other palaces had the intention to fight for the treasures, after seeing the lineup of the 3 great palaces, they all stood in the distance and watched, not easily making a move. Lian Meng's beautiful eyes were filled with shock and anger. Lanran Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, and 9 Firmaments Hall had all sent half-step virtual Sky 9th step experts. Coupled with the other dozen or so experts from these 3 halls, even Lian Meng couldn't bear it. Although Lian Meng had an innate immortal physique, terrifying talent, and powerful strength, her cultivation was only at the intermediate Void Heaven 8th step. Facing a half-step Void Sky 9th stage expert was already difficult, not to mention 3 half-step Void Sky 9th stage experts and a dozen or so experts at the 8th stage of Void Sky 8th stage. Lian Meng bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. With a flick of her jade-like hand, she took out a palm-sized 8 trigrams plate from her spirit ring. Once the 8 trigrams plate appeared, Lian Meng began to form hand seals with both hands and began to activate the 8 trigrams plate. Rumble. The 8 trigrams plate started to spin rapidly. Soon after, a blazing black and white light erupted from it, revolving around Lian Meng's body and forming a black and white defensive array. If one looked carefully, they would see black and white light appearing around the defensive formation. The light gathered below Lian Meng's feet, faintly forming the image of a huge 8 trigrams formation. Bang bang bang! The instant Lian Meng took out her 8 trigrams disc, the 3 half-step virtual Sky 9th step experts from the 3 great palaces had already arrived. Soon after, 3 terrifying attacks continuously bombarded the 8 trigrams disc's defense. The 8 trigrams disc shook violently, as if it would shatter at any moment. Lian Meng's complexion turned slightly pale. The instant the 8 trigrams disc shattered, Lian Meng spat out a mouthful of blood. She took out a talisman and turned into a wisp of green smoke before disappearing. Boundless Heaven and Earth Talisman? The instant Lian Meng disappeared, the 3 half-step virtual Sky 9th stage experts stared blankly at the disappearing Lian Meng. One of them exclaimed in surprise. Junior sister Jing Hai, do you have any way to find Lian Meng? Among the 3 half-step virtual Sky 9th stage experts, a middle-aged man with a gloomy gaze turned to look at Jing Hai. As for the other two half-step virtual Sky Ninth Stage experts, one of them was the purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Palace, and the other was the white-haired old man. Lan Ji followed closely behind the white-haired old man with an extremely respectful expression. The purple-clothed woman and the white-haired old man also looked at Jing Hai. They knew that Jing Hai was Lian Meng's best sister and understood Lian Meng's background the best. She definitely had some methods. I left an imprint on junior sister Lian Meng's body. Senior brother, just follow this imprint. Jing Hai calmly took out a wisp of white light. The instant the white light appeared, it shot into the starry sky ahead as if chasing after something. Let's go. The moment Jing Hai released the white light, the middle-aged man immediately took out his flying divine tool. Soon after, he brought Jing Hai and the rest of the people from the Nine-Cloud Palace and chased after the white light. The moment the middle-aged man shot out, the purple-clothed woman and the white-haired old man also followed closely behind, unwilling to be outdone. As for the people from the other palaces who were originally spectating, they also followed like a swarm of bees. Although the people sent by the Blue Cloud Palace, the Purple Cloud Palace, and the Nine Cloud Palace were much stronger than them, each of them still harbored a fluke mentality. Perhaps they would have a chance to capture Lian Meng. Moreover, they had more people on their side compared to the three palaces. If they joined forces, they might not be the opponents of the three palaces. In a desolate starry sky, on a desolate planet, Lian Meng stopped. At this moment, Lian Meng's face was completely pale. The talisman she was holding in her hand had completely turned into ashes and dissipated. The Heaven and Earth Infinite Talisman was left to her by her master, the Grand Pure One. It could instantly teleport her hundreds of millions of kilometers away, ignoring all obstructions and formations. It was used in a critical moment to escape. Lian Meng looked around and discovered that she was still in the periphery of the boundless Taishu. She knew that she had not gone too far. However, thinking that she had already shaken off the pursuit of the other palaces, Lian Meng felt a lot more at ease. Why do the other palaces of the Grand Pure One Immortal Realm want to capture you? I remember that you are the disciple of the Grand Pure One. Someone actually dares to touch the disciple of the Sky Domain Master? Suddenly, a hoarse voice came from behind Lian Meng. Frightened, Lian Meng immediately unleashed an attack behind her. Chapter 2558. Mass anger. It's you. A masked man appeared in front of Lian Meng. This man had a well-proportioned body and his white clothes made him look extremely slender. Lian Meng was not unfamiliar with this masked man. He was the person who had bid against her in the black market. Moreover, for some reason, when she saw this masked man, Lian Meng felt a strange sense of familiarity. Are you also here to capture me? Lian Meng did not answer the man's question. Instead, she took a few steps back and asked cautiously. The masked man shook his head and said, "Why would I want to capture you? What I want to ask is, why would those people want to capture you? Someone actually dares to offend the disciple of the master of the heaven region. Could it be that they are tired of living? You don't know?" Lian Meng frowned and said. The masked man spread his hands and said, "I'm not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region. I came from another heaven region. I really don't know much about the matters of the Hua Xia heaven region." When the masked man said that he was not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region, Lian Meng relaxed a lot. She looked at the masked man and sighed, "Since you're not a cultivator of the Hua Xia heaven region, it's useless for you to know about this. It's better if you don't know." The masked man went silent and said, "Do you know that someone has placed a tracking imprint on your body?" Lian Meng was startled. She sneered and said, "How is that possible? If someone placed a tracking imprint on my body, I would be able to sense it. Because my body is completely different from ordinary cultivators." The masked man shook his head and said, "I'm not talking about your body specifically. I'm talking about something in your spirit ring that has been imprinted by someone. If you believe me, you can check all the items in your spirit ring." Lian Meng's expression changed slightly. She seemed to have thought of something and quickly took out a jade hairpin from her spirit ring. This jade hairpin had an elegant design. It was sparkling and translucent. It was extremely beautiful. Lian Meng checked the jade hairpin a few times with her spirit sense. Her face turned pale and she immediately destroyed the hairpin. Senior sister Jing Hai. Lian Meng's beautiful eyes were filled with sadness and loss. She did not expect Jing Hai, who she had always treated as her best sister, to be so ambitious. She had placed a tracking imprint on her body long ago. I have to leave this place. Lian Meng glanced at the masked man, then took a step forward, intending to leave this desolate planet. It's too late. They've already surrounded this planet, the masked man said unhurriedly. However, Lian Meng did not believe it. She sent out her spiritual sense, but did not discover anyone. Although she could feel that this masked man's strength was not ordinary, she naturally did not believe that this masked man's divine sense was much stronger than hers. Since she did not discover it, this masked man must be deceiving her. However, the instant Lian Meng flew out of the planet, her face turned extremely pale. That was because many figures were rushing towards her from within the range of her divine sense. Leading the group were the 3 half-step Void Sky 9th Step experts from Azuran Hall, Purple Cloud Hall, and 9 Firmaments Hall. The rest were cultivators from these 3 halls and experts sent by other halls. Moreover, Lian Meng discovered that the killing intent of the 3 half-step virtual Sky 9th stage experts was firmly locked onto her. She knew that she could not escape now. Once she was locked on by the killing intent, it would be difficult for her to escape even if she tried to escape. Moreover, these 3 half-step Void Sky 9th stage powerhouses were extremely fast. They arrived here in just a few breaths of time. Even if Lian Meng tried to escape now, it would be no different from not escaping at all. At the same time, Lian Meng recalled the warning of the masked man. From this, it could be seen that this masked man's divine sense was much stronger than hers. He actually knew that these people were approaching in advance. Thinking of this, Lian Meng returned to the planet. Soon after, she looked at the masked man and said, "The people chasing me will be here soon. They are all people you can't afford to offend. You should take this opportunity to leave. Their target is me, so they won't stop you." The masked man looked deeply at Lian Meng and said with a smile, "Miss, you're too naive. Since I appeared in the same place as you, it's natural for people to think that I'm traveling with you. Not everyone is as kind as you. Miss Lian Meng, you should surrender." A loud shout came from outside the planet. Su, su, su. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Soon after, the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall, the white-haired old man from Azuran Hall, and the purple-clothed woman from Purple Cloud Hall arrived above the planet and looked down at Lian Meng. As for the masked man standing not far from Lian Meng, the 3 of them basically ignored him. After the 3 of them arrived on the planet, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out behind them. Soon after, the rest of the people from the 3 halls arrived as well, followed by the cultivators sent by the other halls. In an instant, the planet was basically surrounded by the experts from the 3 halls. Sigh. It seems that I won't be able to escape today. I can only fight to the death. Lian Meng sighed. With a wave of her jade-like hand, she took out a purple brocade with flowing light. Like a purple snake, it coiled around her body. Miss Lian Meng, you're simply a mantis trying to stop a chariot. You're a smart person. You should give up on resisting and follow my 9 Firmaments Hall. My 9 Firmaments Hall will definitely ensure your safety, said the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall. Miss Lian Meng, Purple Cloud Hall promises not to harm you as long as you follow my Purple Cloud Hall, said the purple-clothed woman with cupped fists. Azen Hall will treat Miss Lian Meng with respect. I hope that Miss Lian Meng can seriously consider it, said the white-haired old man indifferently. Lian Meng sneered, I've seen many of your tricks. Not to mention that I don't believe you. Even if I believe that you won't harm me, I still won't leave with you. I came here this time to enter Boundless Taishu. Don't tell me that you plan to forcibly take me back. If Miss Lian Meng doesn't give us face, then we can only use such extreme means, sneered the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall. The faces of the white-haired old man and the purple-clothed woman were also covered with frost and coldness. They no longer had the enthusiasm from before. Just as the two sides were about to draw their swords, a figure passed by Lian Meng and stood between them. Lian Meng was stunned and immediately said, "What are you doing? This has nothing to do with you. Leave quickly." The person who suddenly stood between them was none other than the masked man. At this moment, the masked man turned his head and gave Lian Meng a reassuring look. Then, he looked at the many experts who had surrounded the entire planet and said indifferently, "I'll give you all a chance to live. Leave immediately before I count to 3. Otherwise, all of you will stay here forever." The masked man's words immediately caused an uproar. Everyone looked at the masked man as if they were looking at an idiot. "Who do you think you are? You're actually giving us a chance to live? Do you believe that I can kill you with a single slap? How dare you speak such arrogant words? You're simply courting death. This kind of trash can only show off with his mouth. When it comes to fighting, he's just an egg." In just an instant, terrifying killing intent gathered on the masked man. Chapter 2559. All stay reckless fool, you actually dare to speak such arrogant words. Do you think you're in existence like Honorable Taiching? The middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall said disdainfully. The purple-clothed woman sneered, her smile filled with disdain. Clearly, she believed that this masked man was just pretending to be a fatty. She knew that once they attacked, this person would die without a doubt. The white-haired old man was disdainful, not even bothering to say a word. The masked man ignored the sneers and disdain of the surrounding experts. Instead, he began counting to himself, as if he was really going to attack when he counted to 3. Others might not know, but the masked man was very clear. He had the confidence and strength to do so. I said, "Are you crazy? Hurry up and leave this place." Lian Meng grabbed the masked man, wanting to forcefully pull him away. However, she soon discovered that the masked man was like a boulder, unable to be pulled away. Although Lian Meng knew that the masked man's strength was not bad, they were not facing one person. Instead, they were facing close to 100 experts. Among them, the weakest was at Void Sky Stage 7, and there were 3 half-step Void Sky Stage 9. Such a lineup was likely able to battle with life comprehension realm powerhouses. Although Lian Meng knew that the masked man was stronger than her, it was impossible for him to have reached the life-enlightening realm. The 100 or so powerhouses surrounding the planet crossed their arms and sneered as they looked at the masked man who was seriously counting. They really wanted to see if the masked man would really dare to face them when he counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. After the masked man counted to 3, he was not surprised by the nearly 100 experts who did not move. He said, "Since you're not leaving, then stay." As he spoke, the masked man suddenly pulled out a long sword. The surface of the long sword was surrounded by a grey energy, filled with a strange aura of death. "You really don't know the meaning of death. If you really dare to attack, then don't blame me for being merciless." The middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Hall sneered. He took a step forward and punched out, aiming for the masked man's heart. The experts from 9 Firmaments Palace who came with them sneered. They wanted to see how the masked man would be killed by their powerful elder. Elder Ju Hai is one of the few half-step illusionary Sky 9th Step experts in our 9 Firmaments Palace. Even in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm, he can be considered an expert. This person is clearly a loose cultivator. Yet, he actually dared to say such bold words. He's simply courting death. Jing Hai crossed his arms and spoke with disdain. Rumble. Soon, the middle-aged man's fist arrived in front of the masked man. The masked man swung his sword, causing the middle-aged man's frightening fist to scatter with a loud bang. The sword aura was like a rainbow as it rushed out and directly smashed in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't expect the masked man's sword chi to be so terrifying. In a moment of carelessness, he was immediately cut in 2 by the sword chi and exploded into a bloody mist. The middle-aged man's soul and illusory heavenly bridge were completely annihilated by the sword chi. Hiss hiss hiss. The moment the middle-aged man was finished off with a single sword strike, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Then, there were sounds of people sucking in cold air. Numerous gazes of disbelief stared fixedly at this scene. Then, an uproar erupted one after another. What's going on? Elder Ju Hai of 9 Firmaments Palace was killed just like that. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Are my eyes playing tricks on me too? Elder Ju Hai was indeed killed. Moreover, he was killed with a single sword strike. This person is terrifying. The purple-clothed woman from Purple Cloud Palace and the grey-haired elder from Azurian Palace both revealed looks of dread. They looked cautiously at the masked man with the grey sword in his hand. A bad feeling rose in their hearts. The experts from 9 Firmaments Palace were all grief-stricken. Jing Hai's jaw was about to drop. He was so stunned that he couldn't speak. That's one already. There are still 90 or so left. The masked man's leisurely voice rang out. A pair of cold eyes fell on the purple-clothed woman and the grey-haired elder. The purple-clothed woman and the grey-haired elder's faces immediately turned ugly. The purple-clothed woman said in a deep voice, "Sir, your strength is not bad. However, if Elder Ju Hai had been careless, you would not have been able to kill him so easily. Moreover, today's matter has nothing to do with you. Please leave quickly. We will not pursue this matter with you." Although the grey-haired elder did not say anything, he clearly agreed with what the purple-clothed woman said. Are you deaf? I said just now that I'll give you 3 seconds to leave immediately. However, you did not leave. Then, according to what I said just now, all of you will stay here. The masked man's indifferent voice rang out. Then, he stomped his right foot. The entire planet shook. Moreover, the shaking energy was like ripples in water. It spread out in all directions, completely affecting the surrounding starry sky. Then, the entire planet and the surrounding starry sky were enveloped in a huge shadow. It's a formation. What a powerful formation. It's a level 9 formation. This person is actually a level 9 divine array master. When did he set up the formation? We didn't even notice it. It's over. It's a level 9 formation. We can't resist it at all. Many cultivators around the planet were in despair. They looked at the huge formation that appeared outside the planet in disbelief. Whoosh. While everyone was in shock, the masked man shot out like an arrow. His target was the purple-clothed woman from the Purple Cloud Hall. How dare you? The purple-clothed woman was shocked and furious. She formed a seal with her jade-like hand. Suddenly, purple energy poured out and turned into a huge purple whale that rushed toward the masked man. The masked man casually slashed with his sword. The purple whale was cut in half. A sword chi pierced through and blasted in front of the purple-clothed woman. The purple-clothed woman's eyes were filled with fear. She took out a purple disc. Suddenly, the terrifying purple energy turned into a huge purple defense. Fart. The sword chi blasted on the purple defense. After a moment of stalemate, the purple defense shattered. The purple-clothed woman looked on in disbelief as the sword chi slashed between her eyebrows. Seeing that the purple-clothed woman, who was prepared, was not a match for the masked man's sword, everyone was shocked. The white-haired old man was scared out of his wits. The purple-clothed woman's strength was on par with his. The purple-clothed woman tried her best to block the attack, but she was still killed by the masked man's sword. How terrifying was this masked man? This person must be an expert of the Void Sky 9 steps, the white-haired old man screamed. He did not have the courage to face the masked man. Instead, he immediately rushed out of the planet. Chapter 2560. The masked man. The white-haired old man forced himself to calm down after being blocked by the level 9 formation. Soon after, he shouted, "We're all on the same boat now. If we want to leave, we have to kill this person. Otherwise, we'll all die. If you want to live, follow this old man and kill this person." Following the white-haired old man's order, the experts from the other palaces who were in a state of chaos calmed down and gathered around the white-haired old man. Be careful. Although Lian Meng was shocked by the masked man's strength, she was worried that the masked man would not be able to withstand the combined forces of over 90 experts. "Sir, we won't make things difficult for you. Besides, we've always minded our own business. There's no need for us to fight to the death. How about this? Open the grade 9 array and let us go. We won't pursue your previous rude behavior. Jing Hai was surrounded by several experts from the 9 Firmaments Palace. Her beautiful eyes stared at the masked man before her. The white-haired old man cursed Jing Hai in his heart for acting recklessly. He slapped Jing Hai to the ground and cupped his hands towards the masked man. Sir, we have no intention of offending you. As long as you let us go, we're willing to pay the corresponding reward. Jing Hai glared at the white-haired old man. Just as she was about to speak, she choked on the surging killing intent of the white-haired old man. The half-step void sky 9th stage expert from the 9 Firmaments Palace had already been killed by the masked man. With her strength, she did not dare to provoke the white-haired old man. Otherwise, even if the white-haired old man killed her, no one would stand up for her. The masked man silently looked at all of this and sneered, "Did you take my words for granted? I said, all of you stay here." The white-haired old man's face immediately darkened. He said malevolently, "Since that's the case, then die. We have so many people. Are you afraid we can't kill you?" After saying that, the white-haired old man waved his right hand. Terrifying divine power poured out and turned into a huge divine power hand that crushed towards the masked man. Attack together. Kill him. The moment the white-haired old man attacked, the other experts followed suit. Many of them rushed towards the masked man with bloodshot eyes. They knew that this was the only way to survive. Only by killing this masked man could they be saved. The moment these experts rushed out, the white-haired old man fell behind and only attacked from afar. After witnessing the masked man easily kill off the purple-clad woman from Purple Cloud Palace and the middle-aged man from 9 Firmaments Palace, who were on the same level as him, the grey-haired old man was extremely fearful of the masked man. Naturally, he did not dare to take the lead and throw his life away. The masked man sneered. He suddenly swung his sword, and immediately, large swathes of space collapsed. Terrifying spatial cracks with distinct layers appeared. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Puff, puff. Some of the experts who were at the front immediately exploded into clouds of blood mist the moment they fell into the spatial rift. They died without a complete corpse. However, there were too many experts rushing over in an instant. After the experts at the front were killed, the experts at the back immediately rushed out of the spatial collapse and arrived in front of the masked man. The masked man was neither hurried nor slow. With a flick of his finger, he took out a huge jade seal from his spirit ring. Immediately, he took it out, transforming it into a huge mountain that blocked in front of him. Bang! 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 The power of the huge jade seal was much more terrifying than the sword chi. No matter how many experts rushed over, they were all blocked by the jade seal. Moreover, because the surface of the jade seal exuded an extremely terrifying daoist rhyme power, the experts who were blocked by the jade seal were all smashed into pieces under the attack of the daoist rhyme power. In less than 10 breaths, nearly half of the 90-odd experts were killed by the powerful daoist rhyme power on the surface of the jade seal. As for the remaining cultivators, they were all terrified and hurriedly moved away from the terrifying jade seal. Unfortunately, the moment these cultivators retreated, the jade seal expanded again. It was as if it covered the sky and the sun. It was so fast that these cultivators did not even have time to react. Ah! 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 Miserable shrieks rang out one after another. The remaining 40 or so cultivators were no match for this terrifying imperial jade seal. The moment they touched the imperial jade seal, they all exploded into clouds of blood mist. Before long, the remaining cultivators were all exterminated. Only 3 figures were left in the huge level 9 great array. They stared blankly at everything that had happened. These 3 people were Lan Ji, the grey-haired old man, and the 9th Heaven Hall's Jing Hai. Die for me. The masked man put away the phagocytosis and grabbed at the void with his right hand. A giant hand made of divine power that covered the sky grabbed at the grey-haired old man. The grey-haired old man roared and 2 black wheels appeared in his hands. Then, he flung them out. The black wheels instantly alternated and transformed into countless wheel phantoms. The phantoms were densely packed and enveloped the masked man's figure. This was the grey-haired old man's strongest attack. The old man had once used this move to kill a half-step void sky 9th step expert. Rumble. Unfortunately, the grey-haired old man's strongest attack only lasted for a moment before it was torn apart by an even more terrifying energy. It was like a torn piece of cloth. Then, a terrifying sword chi that carried with it the will of death swept out. Under the grey-haired old man's incredulous gaze, the sword chi shot out from between his eyebrows. A bloody wound appeared between the white-haired elder's eyebrows. The wound continued to spread until it covered the entire body of the white-haired elder. With a poochie sound, the white-haired elder's entire body was split into two. Blood splattered everywhere. When the grey-haired old man was killed, Jing Hai and Lan Ji trembled. They looked at the masked man in fear, not daring to move at all. 3 half-step void sky 9th step experts and more than 90 void sky 7th step and 8th step experts working together were easily killed by this person. Even if the two of them were pigs, they knew that this mysterious masked man was a powerful void sky 9th step expert. He was in existence on the same level as their hall master. "Sir, we didn't provoke you. I hope you can be merciful." Lan Ji hurriedly begged for mercy. Jing Hai was quite stubborn. Although her beautiful eyes were filled with fear, she didn't beg for mercy. The masked man grabbed Jing Hai with his right hand and threw her in front of Lian Meng. He said indifferently, "I'll leave this woman to you." Lian Meng's beautiful eyes looked at the masked man's back with a complicated expression. However, she didn't look at Jing Hai. Instead, she asked, "Do we know each other?" The masked man didn't answer. Instead, he held Lan Ji and left the planet. Jing Hai's strength was much weaker than Lian Meng's. Coupled with the fact that she was seriously injured, Jing Hai naturally couldn't escape from Lian Meng's palm. Chapter 2561. The Divine Medicine's Whereabouts Impossible. No matter how talented he is, it's impossible for him to become so strong in such a short time. Lian Meng shook her head. Soon after, her beautiful eyes coldly looked at Jing Hai before her as a strand of killing intent burst forth. Jing Hai shuddered and hurriedly said, "Lian Meng, I didn't betray you on purpose. The Hall Master and the others forced me. This has nothing to do with me." Lian Meng sighed softly, "Senior sister Jing Hai, I've always treated you as my best sister and there's nothing I can hide from you. However, you betrayed me and even tried to kill me." Just as Jing Hai was about to say something, Lian Meng waved her hand, sending out a powerful wave of God force into the space between Jing Hai's eyebrows. Jing Hai glared at Lian Meng with hatred in his eyes before collapsing to the ground, dead. After killing Jing Hai, Lian Meng's beautiful eyes looked towards Boundless Taishu and muttered, "Master once said that if he went into seclusion for 100 years, something might have happened to him. If that's the case, I must go to Boundless Taishu to find the 5-spirit cloud space fruit." As she spoke, Lian Meng took out an ordinary bronze mirror from her bosom. This bronze mirror flickered with a 5-colored light spot. Every time this 5-colored light spot flickered, it would shoot out a 5-colored ray of light that swept towards the depths of the Boundless Taishu. Clearly, the direction of this 5-colored ray of light should be the place where the 5-spirit cloud space fruit was located, as Lian Meng had mentioned. After putting away the bronze mirror, Lian Meng rushed towards the direction the 5-colored light beam was pointing at an extremely fast speed. On a barren meteorite in the periphery of Boundless Taishu, a figure stopped on the meteorite while holding a miserable figure. "My lord, you." The masked man casually threw Lan Ji to the side and curled up, looking at the masked man in fear. "Do you still recognize me?" The masked man took off his mask and looked coldly at Lan Ji with a pair of sharp eyes. "It's you." Lan Ji immediately recognized the white-clothed youth in front of him. Wasn't this the Zhuoan who had defeated him in the Long River Galaxy? Back then, he had always thought that the white-robed young man in front of him was a half-step void domain 9th stage cultivator. Therefore, after Zhuoan let him go, he planned to tell the Hall Master about this matter and hope that the Hall Master would help. However, before he could tell the Hall Master about the Zhu Rong worm and Zhuowen, he met the masked Zhuowen again and was captured again. This made Lan Ji feel bitter, and he secretly cursed his bad luck. At the same time, Lan Ji also knew that the white-clothed youth in front of him was a supreme master of the Void Sky 9 steps. He was no match for a nobody like him. You really don't change. Now let me ask you, who else knows about the Gu worm besides you? Zhuowen's murderous gaze locked onto Lan Ji as he asked coldly. Lan Ji trembled and quickly said, "Spare me, Your Excellency. I haven't told Lan Ran about this matter yet. I'm the only one who knows. As long as Your Excellency spares this lowly one's life, I won't divulge it." Zhuowen nodded and immediately said in a deep voice, "You said that the changes in boundless Taishu were all caused by this Gu worm. Is this true?" Lan Ji hesitated and said, "This lowly one obtained this Gu worm fragment by accident. When the changes happened in boundless Taishu, this lowly one happened to be in boundless Taishu. Relying on the reaction of the Gu worm fragment, I saw a burning bug. This bug triggered a reaction from my Gu worm fragment. Because of this lowly one is sure that the burning bug should be the main body of this Gu worm. This thing is definitely something extraordinary. Therefore, this lowly one tried every means to obtain this Gu worm fragment." At this point, Lan Ji quickly added, "Your Excellency, you may not know what that burning bug is. Basically, no one in Hua Xia knows. Even this lowly one only knows that it should be a type of Gu worm. Moreover, it's much stronger than ordinary Gu worms. However, the main body of this Gu worm is extremely cunning. It's like a fish in water in boundless Taishu and has hidden itself very well. If Sage Beiwu hadn't been killed back then, it might not have attracted the attention of the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm." Zhuowen nodded. It seemed that the changes in boundless Taishu were mainly caused by the main body of the Zhurong Gu worm. The 100 halls are searching for the Gu worm in boundless Taishu in addition to sealing it. Zhuowen asked. Yes. Moreover, those who can enter the 100 halls are basically Void Sky 7 steps and above. Otherwise, they won't be able to enter even if they have a quota, Lan Ji quickly said. Zhuowen nodded and asked in a seemingly unconcerned manner, "Why do you want to capture Lian Meng? If I remember correctly, Lian Meng should be a disciple of the Taiching immortal realm, right? Aren't you afraid that the Taiching immortal realm will question you if you dare to capture the disciple of the Sky Domain Master?" Lan Ji had a strange look in his eyes and said, "Sir, you don't know about this, right? The Taiching immortal realm, Shangqing immortal realm, and Yuqing immortal realm supremacy went into seclusion hundreds of years ago and haven't come out until now. Most importantly, the Sky Domain origin, purple chi comes from the east, has collapsed. This caused a sensation for a time. It's because of this that the Sky Domain origin has a problem. Therefore, the 100 halls of the Taiching immortal realm think that something might have happened to the three supremacies. Because Miss Lian Meng has an innate immortal physique, her body contains supreme Dao runes that can help people comprehend the heavenly Dao and make it easier to prove one's Dao. Therefore, the hall masters all invited Miss Lian Meng. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. He knew that the 100 halls of the 100 halls definitely didn't capture Lian Meng for a simple reason. There must be something shameful going on, but Lan Ji didn't know about it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and forced an imprint into Lan Ji's soul. Lan Ji smiled bitterly. He was naturally familiar with this imprint. It was a slave imprint. Back in the Long River Galaxy, Zhuowen had planted it in his soul once. Because of his good performance, Zhuowen had removed the slave imprint. Now that he had repeated the same mistake, Lan Ji secretly cursed his bad luck. He actually met this fiend, Zhuowen, twice. Stay by my side during this time. If you perform well, I will remove the slave imprint for you, Zhuowen said faintly. Lan Ji sighed softly, and a flattering smile suddenly appeared on his face. Now take me to the entrance of the boundless Taishu. I need to enter the boundless Taishu, Zhuowen said coldly. Lan Ji hurriedly nodded and bowed, leading the way. The entrance to the boundless Taishu was actually a smooth rock wall. Because the rock wall was too smooth, it was like a mirror that reflected the figures inside. The entrance was heavily guarded, with teams of cultivator armies patrolling the surroundings. As long as someone tried to enter the entrance, they would immediately be stopped by the guards and interrogated. Do you know the whereabouts of the Great Void Bone-Refining Ginseng, Great Essence Double Dragon Lingji and 8 Trigrams Divining Young Water? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.